Victor was supposed to dig you out. Originally, Fallout New Vegas was planned to have Victor physically dig the Courier out of their grave in a fully playable in-game sequence. Players would have grabbed his hand and pulled themselves up. However, the developers at Obsidian couldn't get the sequence to work properly due to animation and scripting issues, so they replaced it with the pre-rendered cutscene we see in the final game. This means one of the most iconic opening moments in the game was actually a backup plan born from technical limitations. Danny Trejo as Raoul the Ghoul. Danny Trejo, famous for playing tough guy roles in films like Machete and From Dusk Till Dawn, voices Raoul the Ghoul, a centuries-old mechanic and former gunslinger. Trejo brought a surprising warmth and wisdom to the character, making Raoul one of the most beloved companions despite his gruff appearance. The developers wanted Trejo specifically because they felt his real-life toughness and life experience would translate into an authentic, world-weary voice for a character who had seen empires rise and fall. Framing Heck Gunderson for murder. In the Beyond the Beef quest, you can frame Heck Gunderson for his own son's murder by planting evidence. If you succeed, Heck resists arrest and is killed by a Securitron enforcer on the Strip. This outcome is one of the most convoluted and rarely seen quest resolutions in the game, requiring careful planning and a willingness to let an innocent man die for your convenience. The classic Inspiration Photography quest. The Unmarked quest. Classic Inspiration is one of the most overlooked in the entire game. Michelangelo, an artist on the Strip, hires you as his photographer to capture interesting signs across the Mojave Wasteland. Completing the quest rewards you with 950 XP, Strip fame, and several hundred caps, but most players never talk to Angelo long enough to trigger the assignment. The Vault 11 Survivor Mystery. Vault 11 is one of the darkest Vault Tech experiments, where residents had to sacrifice one person each year or face total annihilation. After a bloody civil war, the last survivors discovered the Vault's AI was bluffing. It congratulated them for refusing to comply. The game strongly implies one survivor made it out, but their fate is never revealed. Cut content suggests there was supposed to be a follow-up encounter, but it was removed before release. Robert House's obsession with Vault 21. Mr. House's desire to control Vault 21 is never fully explained, but environmental storytelling and cut dialogue suggest he was after the extensive tunnel network beneath it. House either wanted strategic access to the bunker systems under the Strip or was hunting for lost Vault Tech technology hidden in the Vault's deeper levels. His decision to fill most of the Vault with concrete indicates he found or hid something important down there. The Sunset Sarsaparilla Star Bottle Cap Quest. The Legend of the Star is an unmarked quest where you collect rare bottle caps scattered across the Mojave. Most players stumble on a few by accident, but completing the full collection reveals a dark truth. The prize at the end is a trap set by a long-dead employee, and the treasure hunter who beats you there has already been killed by it. It's a perfectly cynical Fallout twist on the treasure hunt trope. Brahmin tipping actually works in hardcore mode. You can actually tip over Brahmin by walking into them at the right angle. This ridiculous mechanic is a callback to the rural legend of cow tipping, adapted for the Mojave's two-headed cattle. It serves no purpose beyond being a silly interaction that rewards players who push the boundaries of the game's physics system. The two-step goodbye explosion. The two-step goodbye is a unique ballistic fist added in the Gun Runner's Arsenal DLC. It deals less damage than a standard ballistic fist, but if you kill an enemy with a critical hit, they explode after 2 seconds, dealing splash damage to everything nearby. This makes it hilariously effective against clustered enemies, turning your punches into delayed grenades. Driver Nephi's name, Origin Driver Nephi, the Fiend boss wielding a unique golf club called the Nephi's Golf Driver, is named after his weapon, not the other way around. According to in-game lore, he became known as Driver Nephi because of his signature 9-iron, which he uses to brutally beat his victims. The club itself deals nearly double the damage of a standard 9-iron and has become one of the most memorable melee weapons in the game. The Great Khan Armory. Many players don't realize the Great Khans have a surprisingly well-stocked armory at their Red Rock Canyon base. If you build a good reputation with them, you can purchase weapons and supplies from their quartermaster. This hidden vendor is easy to miss because most players either kill the Khans or avoid their camp entirely, never discovering the trading opportunity. Fight Night at the Thorn. The Thorn is a hidden underground arena in Westside where Red Lucy raises deadly creatures and pits them against each other, or against you. The Fight Night unmarked quest involves battling increasingly dangerous animals for caps and reputation. Most players never find the Thorn because it's tucked away in an old cistern beneath the streets, far from any main quest markers. The Camp Guardian Tragedy. Camp Guardian is an abandoned NCR outpost high in the mountains, reachable only by climbing steep cliffs. Scattered along the path are pages from the camp's daily log, revealing how soldiers were slowly picked off by death claws until only one survivor remained. By the time you reach the top, you find his corpse, making it one of the most isolated and tragic environmental stories in the game. The Nellis Artillery Debug Weapon. Hidden in the game files is a weapon called Nellis Artillery that uses the Fat Man model and fires unused ammo called Nellis Artillery shells. It was likely used during development to test the iconic bombardment sequence where the boomers shell intruders. The weapon was cut very early, but it remains in the code as a ghost of the developer's testing process. Misfortune's cut rail cannons. In the script governing Misfortune's weapons, there are references to two cut weapons, the white rail cannon and the heavy rail cannon. Beyond these script mentions, nothing else remains. No models, no textures, no stats. They were scrapped so early in development that only their names survived, hinting at energy weapons that never made it into the Mojave. The double-barrel shotgun's two-shot variant concept art for New Vegas shows a two-barrel shotgun variant that would have fired only 2 shots per trigger pull, making it less effective than the final tri-barrel version, but more common and easier to use. The concept art even shows color-coded barrels, green for the two-barrel model and yellow for the tri-barrel. This design variation was abandoned, leaving only the familiar single shotgun model we know today. The Faderator Debug Weapon. The Faderator is one of several debug weapons left in the game files created by tech producer Jason Fader as an internal development tool. It was used to quickly test enemy behavior and level transitions, allowing developers to instantly warp or remove NPCs during testing. While not accessible through normal gameplay, the Faderator remains a fun reminder of the tools Obsidian used to build the game. Cut, rocket, launcher, schematics. In unpatched versions of Fallout New Vegas, you can actually find the schematics to craft a rocket launcher inside Nellis Air Force Base. However, the weapon doesn't exist in the game, so even if you find the plans, it's impossible to craft. This oversight was later patched out, but it remains one of the strangest examples of incomplete content left in the original release. Energy cell ammo for unarmed weapons. The Zap Glove and Displacer Glove were originally meant to use energy cells as ammunition, giving them a resource cost like other energy weapons. Similarly, the ballistic fist was intended to consume small energy cells with each punch. These ammo requirements were removed during balancing, making the weapons more practical but less thematically consistent with the game's energy weapon mechanics. The flamer burning effect on cut weapons. Several cut weapons in the game files were set up to cause the flamer's burning damage over time effect, even though they weren't flame-based. These experimental weapons likely use fire mechanics as placeholder effects during development, showing how the team tested different damage types before settling on final weapon behaviors. Yuri Lowenthal's massive recording load. Yuri Lowenthal, who voiced multiple NCR troopers and minor characters, holds the record for the most dialogue recorded by a single actor in New Vegas. His 1,800 pages of script covered everything from generic guard barks to quest-critical exposition, meaning players encounter his voice constantly throughout the Mojave without realizing it's mostly the same person. Felicia Day as Veronica Felicia Day, creator of the web series The Guild, voiced Veronica Santangelo, the sarcastic Brotherhood of Steel scribe. Day brought a playful, modern energy to Veronica that made her feel distinct from the game's more stoic or bitter companions. Her casting was part of Obsidian's strategy to include recognizable nerd culture icons, betting that fans would appreciate hearing familiar voices in the Wasteland. Zach Levi as Arcade Gannon. Zach Levi, star of the TV series Chuck, voiced Arcade Gannon with a mix of dry wit and hidden pain. Arcade's dialogue is packed with obscure historical and literary references, and Levi's delivery sells the character as an over-educated idealist trapped in a brutal world. His performance makes Arcade one of the most intellectually engaging companions, appealing to players who enjoy dense, reference-heavy writing. Michael Dorn's Legion role. Michael Dorn, famous for playing Worf on Star Trek: The Next Generation, lent his deep, commanding voice to a Legion character. His casting added gravitas to Caesar's forces, making even minor Legion NPCs sound more intimidating. Obsidian deliberately cast actors with strong, recognizable voices to reinforce the faction's militaristic presence. Chris Christopherson's Wasteland cameo country music legend and actor. Chris Christopherson voiced Chief Hanlon, the weary NCR Ranger leader stationed at Camp Golf. Christopherson's weathered, world-weary delivery perfectly captured Hanlon's disillusionment with the NCR's expansion and his guilt over manipulating intelligence reports. His performance added emotional weight to one of the game's most morally complex side characters. The Wild Wasteland trait's hidden content. The Wild Wasteland trait doesn't just add silly Easter eggs, it completely replaces certain encounters. For example, instead of finding mercenaries near a crashed satellite, Wild Wasteland players encounter aliens wielding unique weapons. This means the trait actively changes loot tables and enemy spawns, giving players a genuinely different gameplay experience rather than just cosmetic jokes. The Holy Frag Grenades. With Wild Wasteland enabled, players can find holy frag grenades near a pile of dead bodies and a vicious rabbit. This is a direct reference to Monty Python and the Holy Grail's killer rabbit scene. The grenades function identically to normal explosives, but their name and placement turn a random loot spot into a full-blown comedy reference. The crashed UFO near Horowitz Farmstead. Wild Wasteland players who explore near Horowitz Farmstead can find a crashed UFO with alien bodies scattered around it. This isn't just set dressing. The aliens carry the unique alien blaster, one of the most powerful energy weapons in the game. Without Wild Wasteland, this encounter is replaced with a much less interesting mercenary camp. meaning the trait locks you out of easy access to the alien blaster if you don't take it. The monorail bomber was meant to escape. During the I Put a Spell on You quest, the original design allowed the Legion infiltrator planting the bomb on the NCR monorail to potentially escape if you didn't catch him in time. Cut dialogue and quest stages show that the bomber could have fled the strip, leading to a manhunt scenario. This was simplified in the final version, where the bomber always stays in place until you confront him. You can buy weapons at Hoover Dam. Many players don't realize that Quartermaster Barden at Hoover Dam will sell weapons and supplies to the Courier if you have sufficient NCR reputation. His inventory includes solid mid-tier gear that's easy to overlook because most players visit the dam during scripted story beats, not as a shopping destination. The Searchlight Fire Station shortcut camp Searchlight, irradiated by the Legion, contains a fire station with a key that opens multiple buildings throughout the town. Most players avoid Searchlight entirely due to the heavy radiation and feral ghoul presence, meaning they never find the key or realize it unlocks shortcuts through the area. It's one of the most useful keys for players attempting to loot Searchlight efficiently. Brotherhood's true destination. At the end of Come Fly With Me, the Bright Brotherhood launches into space seeking the Promised Land. If you sabotage their rockets, they crash and die. If you help them, they successfully leave, but there's no confirmation they ever find a safe place to land. The quest's ambiguous ending leaves their fate open, making it one of New Vegas's most bittersweet resolutions. The Hidden Supply Cave, near Good Springs. Just outside Good Springs, there's an unmarked cave containing a small stash of supplies, including weapons, ammo, and healing items. It's positioned as a safety net for new players who are struggling, but it's tucked away far enough that many people miss it entirely, never realizing the developers left them an early game care package. The Sniper on the Strip. If you have negative strip reputation, a hidden sniper will occasionally take shots at you from the rooftops. Most players never notice this mechanic because they maintain neutral or positive standing, meaning they walk past the sniper's perch without ever being targeted. It's a subtle reputation consequence that rewards paying attention to faction dynamics. The King's real-world inspiration. The King, leader of the gang in Freeside, is directly inspired by Elvis Presley impersonators who flooded Las Vegas after the real Elvis's death. His gang's aesthetic, mannerisms, and school for teaching the King's style are all satirical takes on Elvis worship. The developers leaned into this absurdity, turning a real cultural phenomenon into one of the Mojave's most memorable factions. The Lonesome Road was originally larger. The Lonesome Road DLC was supposed to be even bigger, with additional areas of the Divide open for exploration. Cut content reveals plans for more side areas, additional enemy types, and extended Ulysses dialogue. Time and budget constraints forced Obsidian to trim the DLC down, but the final version still stands as one of the most atmospheric and narrative-heavy expansions in the game. Eddie's hidden upgrades, Eddie's the iBot, can receive upgrades in both the base game and the Lonesome Road DLC, but the exact stat boosts change depending on which quest line you complete first. Most players don't realize the upgrade order matters, meaning they miss out on optimizing Eddie's combat abilities. This hidden branching system rewards players who pay close attention to companion quests. The Ghost People's regeneration in the Dead Money DLC. The Ghost People enemies regenerate health unless you dismember them or use specific weapons. This mechanic is explained through environmental storytelling. They're trapped in hazmat suits that keep pumping healing chemicals into their bodies. The cloud and the suits have fused them into undead horrors, making them one of the most disturbing enemy types in Fallout. Dean Domino's ego check. Dean Domino, the pre-war ghoul entertainer in Dead Money, has a hidden reputation system based on how you treat him. If you ever show him up or insult his pride during dialogue, he becomes permanently hostile later in the DLC, even if you pass all the skill checks. This fragile ego mechanic forces players to walk on eggshells around Dean, reinforcing his character as a spiteful narcissist. The Sierra Madre vending machines. Dead Money's Sierra Madre vending machines let you craft almost anything using Sierra Madre chips as currency, including stim packs, ammo, and weapon repair kits. What most players miss is that the machines remain accessible if you bring chips back to the Mojave, making them the most valuable loot in the entire DLC. Savvy players who max out chip collection essentially gain infinite crafting resources. The abandoned Boss Bunker, hidden near Black Mountain, is an abandoned Brotherhood of Steel bunker that most players never find. It contains dead paladins, scattered supplies, and terminal entries detailing a failed recon mission. The bunker doesn't tie into any quest, making it pure environmental storytelling, a glimpse at the Brotherhood's struggles in the Mojave before the Courier's arrival. The Rat Slayer's hidden scope. The Rat Slayer, a unique varmint rifle found in a refrigerator in Brock Flower Cave, comes equipped with a night vision scope. This makes it one of the best stealth weapons in the early game, but many players ignore varmint rifles entirely, assuming they're starter gear. The Rat Slayer's suppressor, scope, and solid damage make it viable well into the mid-game for stealth builds. The Gunrunner's Vendortron. The Gunrunner's Vendortron outside New Vegas is one of the best weapon merchants in the game, but it's easy to miss because there's no quest marker pointing to it. The Vendortron's inventory includes high-end weapons, mods, and ammunition that refresh regularly, making it a must-visit for players building optimized loadouts. The location is tucked into a corner of Freeside, easily overlooked during the rush to reach the strip. The Fiend Leader's unique loot. The three Fiend Leaders, Motor Runner, Cook, and Driver Nephi, each drop unique weapons when killed. However, the bounty quest from Camp McCarran doesn't require you to loot them, meaning some players complete the quest without realizing they missed unique gear. Motor Runner's helmet, Cook's flamer, and Nephi's golf club are all worth collecting, but you have to remember to search their bodies. The Burned Man's survival. Joshua Graham, the Burned Man from Honest Hearts, survived being lit on fire and thrown into the Grand Canyon by Caesar. His appearance, wrapped head to toe in bandages and soaked in medicinal powder, is one of the most striking character designs in Fallout. What makes his survival obscure is that very few NPCs in the base game even mention him, meaning new players entering Honest Hearts have no idea who he is or why he matters. The survivalist tragic story Randall Clark. The survivalist never appears alive in Honest Hearts, but his story is told through terminal entries scattered across Zion Canyon. He survived the Great War, lost his family, and spent decades protecting the tribes of Zion from a distance. By the time you find his skeleton and read his final logs, you've pieced together one of the most emotionally devastating backstories in Fallout, and he was never even a speaking character. The White Legs' unique language. The White Legs tribe in Honest Hearts uses a pidgin dialect, mixing English with tribal cant. This linguistic detail was carefully crafted by Obsidian's writers to make the tribe feel culturally distinct. The White Legs' worship of Ulysses and their mimicry of his dreadlocks further establish them as a cargo cult faction, imitating symbols they don't fully understand. Old World Blues personality tests. The think tank scientists in Old World Blues constantly address you as a brain in a jar, refusing to acknowledge you have a body. This absurd comedy bit is undercut by darker implications. The scientists have been trapped in mechanical bodies for so long they've forgotten what humanity feels like. The DLC uses humor to explore body horror and identity loss, making it one of the strangest tonal balancing acts in gaming. The stealth suit MK2's personality. The stealth suit MK2 in Old World Blues has an AI that constantly talks to you, commenting on your health, advising you to sneak, and injecting you with chems. What's obscure is that the suit's personality shifts based on how you respond to it. If you're dismissive, it becomes passive-aggressive. If you're kind, it becomes affectionate. This dynamic AI companion via armor is one of the DLC's best surprises. Mobius was protecting you. Dr. Mobius, the villain of Old World Blues, was actually protecting the Mojave from the think tank the entire time. His threats and monstrous persona were a performance designed to keep the scientists trapped in the big empty crater. Once you learn the truth, his goofy evil act takes on tragic weight. He's been holding back dangerous madmen for centuries while pretending to be the real threat. The think tank's pre-war crimes. The think tank scientists weren't always insane cyborgs. Terminal entries reveal they were complicit in horrific pre-war experiments, including lobotomies, kidnappings, and weapons testing on unwilling subjects. The Old World Blues DLC presents them as comedic villains, but their backstory reveals they were monsters long before the bombs fell, making their current state less tragic and more karmic. The Sync's appliance personalities. The Sync in Old World Blues is filled with sentient appliances, each with its own personality. The toaster is genocidal, the muggy collectibles obsessed, and the light switch lonely. These personalities were programmed by pre-war scientists as a joke, but after 200 years of isolation, they've developed genuine neuroses. The appliances are simultaneously funny and deeply sad, embodying the DLC's weird tonal mix. Ulysses' obsession with symbols. Ulysses, the antagonist of Lonesome Road, is obsessed with flags, symbols, and the idea of identity through nationhood. His dialogue is packed with references to the old world symbols and their meaning in the post-apocalypse. This thematic obsession makes Ulysses one of the most philosophical Fallout villains, but his dense, metaphor-heavy speech also makes him one of the most divisive characters in the fanbase. The Divide's detonation was your fault. Lonesome Road reveals that the Courier unknowingly caused the destruction of the Divide by delivering a package containing a detonator for dormant nuclear missiles. Ulysses witnessed the blast and blamed you for erasing an entire community. This retroactive guilt trip reframes the entire game. You've been playing a character with a dark past you didn't even know existed. The marked men's tragic nature. The marked men in Lonesome Road are NCR and Legion soldiers who were caught in the Divide's nuclear storms. Radiation and wind flayed their skin, but they didn't die. Instead, they became undead horrors still fighting their war. They attack based on your faction clothing, showing they've retained some twisted memory of loyalty even after losing their humanity. The Courier's past deliveries. Throughout Lonesome Road, Ulysses references previous jobs the Courier completed before the game began. These hints suggest the Courier was a prolific and reliable Mojave Express employee, crisscrossing the wasteland for years before Benny's ambush. This hidden backstory gives the player character depth and history, even though you never see any of it in-game. The Lonesome Road ending nukes. At the end of Lonesome Road, you can choose to launch nuclear missiles at either the NCR, the Legion, both, or neither. Nuking a faction opens up new high-level areas filled with dangerous enemies and rare loot. but it also tanks your reputation with the targeted faction. This choice has the most tangible gameplay consequences of any DLC ending in New Vegas. The cut Wild Wasteland alien invasion, hidden in the game files, is evidence of a planned Wild Wasteland encounter involving a full-scale alien invasion near the REPCON test site. The encounter would have included multiple UFOs, alien soldiers, and unique weapons. It was cut due to scope and time constraints, but modders have since restored parts of it, showing how ambitious Obsidian's original Wild Wasteland plans were. The Atomic Wrangler's Prostitution Quest. The Atomic Wrangler Casino in Freeside offers an unmarked quest where you recruit escorts for their clientele. You can hire a smooth-talking ghoul, a robot, or even a super mutant, depending on what the client requests. It's one of the strangest side quests in the game, played entirely for dark comedy, while exploring the Mojave's seedy underbelly. The Gomorrah Chlorine Sabotage. During the How Little We Know quest, you can flood the Gomorrah basement with chlorine gas, killing everyone inside. This choice is brutal and efficient, but it locks you out of other quest solutions and turns the Omertas permanently hostile. Most players negotiate or use stealth, never realizing you can just commit a mass chemical attack. The Boomer's Bomber Loyalty Requirement. To get the Boomers to support you at Hoover Dam, you must raise their reputation high enough by completing multiple side quests, including raising a bomber from Lake Mead. The bomber sequence is one of the game's most visually striking moments, but it's entirely optional. Players who skip Nellis Air Force Base never see it, missing one of the most unique faction aids in the final battle. The Hidden Ballistic Fist Schematics. The Ballistic Fist, one of the best unarmed weapons in the game, has schematics hidden in a shack near the Devil's Throat. Most players never find them because the location is unmarked and off the beaten path. Crafting the Ballistic Fist yourself is significantly cheaper than buying one, but only players who explore thoroughly discover this option. The Brotherhood Bunker's Self-Destruct. During the Still in the Dark quest, you can trigger the Hidden Valley Bunker self-destruct sequence, killing everyone inside, including the Brotherhood of Steel leadership. This extreme option is rarely chosen because it requires turning on a faction that could be useful allies, but it's one of the most decisive ways to handle the Brotherhood's isolationist problem. Veronica's Dress and the Brotherhood. Veronica Santangelo wants a dress, which seems like a simple companion quest until you realize it represents her desire for a life outside the Brotherhood's rigid military structure. Finding her a cocktail dress triggers heartfelt dialogue about dreams, identity, and the cost of loyalty. It's one of the game's quietest but most effective character moments, hidden behind a seemingly trivial fetch quest. The Brotherhood's failed NCR war. The Brotherhood of Steel in New Vegas is a shadow of its former self because they lost a war against the NCR years before the game begins. This backstory is revealed through dialogue and terminal entries, showing that the Brotherhood's pride and refusal to share technology led to their near destruction. The Hidden Valley Bunker is essentially their last refuge, making their isolationism tragic rather than just stubborn. Raoul's Gunslinger Past. Raoul the Ghoul's companion quest reveals he was once a legendary gunslinger, in Mexico feared and respected across the wasteland. His decision to become a mechanic instead of continuing his violent lifestyle is framed as either wisdom or cowardice, depending on your advice. Raoul's quest is one of the few that lets you shape a companion's future philosophy, rather than just solving their immediate problem. Lily's Schizophrenia and Stealth Boys. Lily Bowen, the friendly Nightkin grandmother, suffers from schizophrenia caused by prolonged Stealth Boy use. Her other voice is actually a memory of her master, who she simultaneously loves and resents. Her companion quest forces you to choose whether she should keep taking medication that dulls her memories of her grandchildren or stop and risk worsening her mental state. There's no good answer, making it one of the game's cruelest choices. Boone's first recon trauma, Craigie. Boone's backstory involves a traumatic sniper mission where his first recon unit was ordered to fire on civilian targets. His guilt over following orders and his later mercy killing of his enslaved wife make him one of the most damaged companions in New Vegas. Boone's loyalty quest, One for My Baby, is the darkest companion storyline in the game, dealing with revenge, PTSD, and survivor's guilt. Cass and the Crimson Caravan conspiracy rose of Sharon Cassidy's quest, Heartache by the Number, uncovers a conspiracy where the Crimson Caravan and Van Graffs colluded to destroy competing traders. You can either expose them legally or burn their operations to the ground with Cass. The violent option is cathartic but morally questionable, forcing you to decide if revenge is worth becoming a murderer. Rex's brain transplant options. Rex, the king's cyber dog, needs a new brain to survive. You can choose between three options: a loyal guard dog's brain, a violent fighter's brain, or a fast courier dog's brain. Each choice changes Rex's combat stats and personality, making it one of the few companion quests where your decision has permanent mechanical consequences. The Lucky 38 sealed floors. The Lucky 38 casino has multiple sealed floors that you can never access. Environmental clues and cut content suggest these floors were meant to house additional quests and encounters related to Mr. House's pre-war life and Securitron production. Budget and time constraints left them as locked doors, but they remain one of the game's most tantalizing, inaccessible areas. Yes Man's programmed friendliness. Yes Man is always cheerful and helpful no matter how you treat him, because he's programmed to be submissive to whoever holds his data chip. His forced positivity is darkly funny, but it also raises questions about free will and AI rights. Yes Man's upgrade at the end of the Independent Vegas route makes him more assertive, implying he might not stay loyal forever, a chilling hint about the future. The Forecaster's psychic ability. The Forecaster, a child on the strip who sells future predictions, has actual psychic powers, according to developer commentary. His predictions aren't scams. He genuinely sees fragments of possible futures. This detail is never explicitly confirmed in-game, leaving players to decide if he's a mutant, a charlatan, or something stranger. The Scorched Sierra Power Armor. The Scorched Sierra Power Armor is a unique NCR-branded set found in the Searchlight Fire Station. Its distinctive blackened paint job comes from radiation exposure during the Legion's dirty bomb attack. The armor is purely cosmetic compared to other power armor, but its lore significance and rarity make it a favorite among collectors. The Remnant's power armor requirements. The best power armor in the game, Remnant's power armor, requires completing the Enclave Remnants quest for Auld Lang Syne. You must convince the elderly ex-Enclave members to fight at Hoover Dam, then loot the armor from their faction stash. Most players never see it because the quest is easy to miss and requires high speech or specific quest. Knowledge. The implant cap at the New Vegas Clinic. The New Vegas Medical Clinic sells stat-boosting implants, but you can only buy as many as your endurance score allows. This mechanic encourages players to invest in endurance early or use temporary boosts to buy multiple implants in one session. Savvy players max out their implants before raising skills, getting the most efficient build possible. The Hoover Dam ending variations. The Hoover Dam battle has over a dozen variations depending on which factions you sided with, which companions you recruited, and which side quests you completed. The sheer number of permutations means almost no two players see the exact same ending sequence, making it one of the most reactive final battles in RPG history. The Legion's omitted content, Caesar's Legion, was supposed to have significantly more content, including Legion-controlled towns, more quests exploring their philosophy, and non-combat interactions showing their society's structure. Time constraints forced Obsidian to cut most of this, leaving the Legion feeling underdeveloped compared to the NCR. This missing content is one of the game's most frequently discussed what-ifs. The Strip's 3 casinos were originally 5. The New Vegas Strip was originally planned to include 5 casinos instead of 3. Budget and performance issues on the Xbox 360 and PS3 forced Obsidian to scale back, leaving only the tops, Gamora, and Ultra Lux. Cut dialogue and quest references hint at what the missing casinos would have offered, making the strip feel smaller than intended. Mr. House's life support. If you open Mr. House's life support chamber, you discover he's a 261-year-old man, barely clinging to life. The moment you expose him to outside air, his immune system fails, and he dies within a year regardless of your choice to kill him or not. This grim reveal shows that House's immortality was always an illusion. He was already dying, just very slowly. The Securitron Army upgrading Mr. House's Securitron Army using the Platinum chip visibly changes the robots throughout the Mojave. They shift from old police models to heavily armed military variants with missile launchers and Gatling guns. This visual upgrade is one of the most satisfying your choices matter moments, as you can literally see the balance of power shift across the wasteland. The perfect Legion reputation. Earning idolized reputation with Caesar's Legion while completing an NCR or house ending requires careful reputation management and exploiting bugs. The Legion offers fewer quests than the NCR, making it harder to max their approval without committing to their route. Players who achieve this balance unlock unique dialogue acknowledging their strange position as a Legion hero fighting against them. The 18-month development cycle. Fallout New Vegas was developed in just 18 months using Fallout 3's engine and assets. Despite this brutal timeline, Obsidian created one of the most beloved RPGs of all time, packed with branching quests, memorable characters, and player choice. The game's development crunch is legendary, and the fact that it shipped with so much content, finished or cut, is a testament to the team's skill and dedication. 3 playable races were cut. In the earliest design documents for New Vegas, Obsidian pitched the idea of 3 playable races: human, ghoul, and super mutant. This would have been a radical departure from Fallout 3's human-only protagonist, and would have dramatically changed how NPCs reacted to the Courier throughout the game. However, Bethesda strongly discouraged this approach, citing the massive technical challenges it would create. Every piece of armor, every weapon, and every animation would need to be adapted for 3 different body types and proportions, essentially tripling the art and programming workload. Fergus Urquhart stated that Bethesda didn't outright say no, but their feedback was phrased as a very strongly worded suggestion that Obsidian not attempt it. The idea was scrapped early in pre-production, but remnants of this ambition can be seen in how thoroughly the game explores ghoul and mutant characters through companions like Raoul and Lily, giving players a window into those experiences even if they couldn't embody them directly. The cut content represents one of the biggest what-if scenarios in New Vegas's development history. New Vegas was always meant to be a spin-off. Contrary to popular belief, Fallout New Vegas was never intended to be Fallout 4 or a full sequel to Fallout 3. Obsidian co-owner Chris Parker stated in interviews that the project was always conceived as essentially a gigantic expansion, similar to how Grand Theft Auto, Vice City, and San Andreas were standalone spin-offs rather than numbered sequels to GTA 3. This positioning gave Obsidian creative freedom to experiment with different factions, a new region, and a more morally ambiguous tone, without the pressure of advancing the main Fallout timeline in a specific direction. The spin-off designation also explains why the game reuses so many of Fallout 3's assets, animations, and mechanics. It was designed from the ground up to be a faster, more focused project, rather than a ground-up reinvention. Ironically, despite its spin-off status, New Vegas is often considered by fans to be one of the best entries in the entire franchise, with its reputation surpassing the mainline Fallout 4 in many circles. The spin-off label hasn't diminished its legacy. If anything, it highlights how much Obsidian accomplished within the constraints of working with an existing engine and a brutal 18-month timeline. The 3-page pitch that sold the game. Obsidian's pitch to Bethesda for Fallout New Vegas was astonishingly short, just 3 pages long. Fergus Urquhart explained that because of Obsidian's roots in Black Isle Studios, the original creators of Fallout 1 and 2, Bethesda didn't need much convincing that the team could deliver a quality product. The pitch focused on the core concept, a post-apocalyptic Las Vegas controlled by a technocratic dictator, surrounded by warring factions, vying for control of Hoover Dam and its precious electricity and water. The brevity of the pitch is remarkable, given how dense and complex the final game turned out to be, with its branching faction quest lines, companion arcs, and multiple endings. The trust Bethesda placed in Obsidian based on their pedigree allowed the studio to hit the ground running without the lengthy approval processes that typically bog down licensed game development. This streamlined greenlight process was essential given the tight production schedule, and it shows how reputation and past work can open doors in the gaming industry. The West Coast was Obsidian's territory. When Obsidian pitched New Vegas, there was an informal understanding that Bethesda Game Studios would focus on the East Coast of post-apocalyptic America, while Obsidian would take the West Coast. Bethesda had already established Washington, D.C. in Fallout 3 and would go on to tackle Boston in Fallout 4, so giving Obsidian access to California, Nevada, and the surrounding territories made sense from both a creative and logistical standpoint. The West Coast was also the original setting for Black Isle's Fallout 1 and 2, meaning Obsidian could draw on legacy lore, factions like the NCR and Brotherhood of Steel, and the established history of the region without stepping on Bethesda's toes. This division of territory allowed both studios to build their own distinct corners of the Fallout universe, each with unique aesthetics, political dynamics, and storytelling approaches. The West Coast's focus on rebuilding nations and ideological conflict contrasted sharply with the East Coast's more fragmented, survivalist tone, giving players genuinely different experiences depending on which game they played. The Rat Pack, a 1950s Vegas aesthetic. Early in development, someone on the Obsidian team threw out the idea of the Rat Pack, the group of entertainers including Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr., who defined 1950s Las Vegas glamour. This reference became a touchstone for the game's aesthetic, blending post-apocalyptic decay with echoes of old-world glitz and showmanship. The developers leaned heavily into the retro-futuristic vision of Vegas, imagining what the city would look like if 1950s atomic age optimism had continued unchecked until the bombs fell in 2077. This resulted in the neon-soaked strip, the lounge singer vibes of the radio stations, and characters like Mr. House who embody pre-war excess and ambition. The Rat Pack influence also extended to the game's jazzy, crooning soundtrack, with songs that evoke smoky casino lounges and late-night performances. By anchoring New Vegas in this specific cultural moment, Obsidian created a setting that felt distinct from the bleak, bombed-out ruins of Fallout 3's Capital Wasteland, offering players a glimpse of a world trying to reclaim its past glory rather than merely surviving in the rubble. Josh Sawyer's talk on choice architecture, Fallout New Vegas project director Josh Sawyer gave a famous GDC talk in 2012 titled Choice Architecture, Player Expression, and Narrative Design in Fallout New Vegas, where he broke down the design philosophy behind the game's branching quests and faction systems. Sawyer explained that every quest was designed to be completable in multiple ways, through combat, stealth, diplomacy, or even outright chaos. This choice architecture meant that players could build wildly different characters: a smooth talking diplomat, a silent sniper, a berserker with a sledgehammer, and still experience the full story. Sawyer emphasized that this level of flexibility required meticulous planning, with designers needing to account for players who killed every NPC on site or pacifists who refused to fire a single shot. This approach contrasts with many modern RPGs that funnel players into a limited set of good or bad paths. Sawyer's talk became required viewing for game designers interested in player agency, and it solidified New Vegas's reputation as a masterclass in branching narrative design. Yes Man was created as a quest failsafe. Yes Man, the cheerful Securitron who enables the independent Vegas ending, wasn't originally part of the game's narrative design. He was created as a failsafe to ensure players could still complete the main quest even if they killed every major faction leader. Lead designer John Gonzalez explained in interviews that the team realized players might murder Mr. House, Caesar, and NCR leadership for fun or by accident, which would normally lock them out of the ending. Yes Man's AI programming, he's literally incapable of saying no, means he's always available to help the player, even if they've burned every other bridge. This decision reflects Obsidian's commitment to player freedom, ensuring that no matter how chaotic or destructive your choices, the game would still provide a path to the finale. Ironically, Yes Man became one of the most popular endings, with many players choosing Independent Vegas specifically because it allowed them to reject all factions and take control themselves. What started as a technical necessity became a thematic statement about individualism and self-determination. John Gonzalez's vision for Benny. John Gonzalez, the lead creative designer for New Vegas, had a clear vision for Benny from the start. A smooth, talking opportunist who shoots you in the head not out of malice, but because you were a loose end in his plan to steal the platinum chip. Gonzalez wanted Benny to be likable despite being the game's initial antagonist, which is why players can choose to forgive him, sleep with him, or even help him escape rather than killing him outright. Benny's characterization as a rat pack mobster fit perfectly with the Vegas aesthetic, and Gonzalez specifically wanted him to use period-appropriate slang like ring a ding ding and baby to sell the retro casino vibe. The choice to cast Matthew Perry added another layer, as Perry's natural charm and comedic timing made Benny feel more like a flawed dreamer than a pure villain. Benny's complex characterization set the tone for the entire game. Moral ambiguity, second chances, and the idea that everyone in the Mojave is just trying to survive and get ahead, often at someone else's expense. Eric Fenstermaker's White Glove Society overhaul the White Glove Society questline, one of the darkest in the game, was significantly expanded by designer Eric Fenstermaker after he took over the casino factions. Originally, the White Gloves were conceived as a simple metaphor for Vegas' excess and elitism, but Fenstermaker added layers of intrigue, moral compromise, and player choice that turned Beyond the Beef into one of the most memorable quests in New Vegas. The decision to make the society former cannibals trying to reform, with a splinter faction attempting to return to their old ways, created a tension that players could exploit or resolve in multiple ways. You could expose the conspiracy, join it, frame innocent people, or even serve your own companions to the cannibals. Fenstermaker's work exemplifies Obsidian's quest design philosophy. Every major quest needed multiple solutions that reflected different playstyles and moral alignments. The White Glove Society went from a surface-level parody of high society to a genuinely unsettling exploration of addiction, identity, and the thin veneer of civilization. Corpse journals as quest failsafes. One of Fallout New Vegas's most clever design solutions was the use of corpse journals to ensure quests could progress even if players killed key NPCs. If you murdered someone before they could give you critical information, you'd find a journal or note on their body that provided the next clue or objective. This system allowed Obsidian to maintain their kill anyone philosophy without breaking quest chains. Designer John Gonzalez credited this approach as essential for supporting different playstyles, particularly for chaotic or evil characters who solved problems with violence first. It also added environmental storytelling. Reading a dead NPC's journal often revealed motivations, fears, or plans that made the world feel richer even after the character was gone. This design choice became a hallmark of Obsidian's RPG philosophy and influenced how later CRPGs handled player freedom. The Corpse Journal system proved that player agency and narrative coherence don't have to be mutually exclusive. With careful planning, you can let players break everything and still deliver a satisfying story. The strip's NPC memory tricks. The New Vegas strip was a technical nightmare for the Xbox 360 and PS3, which struggled to render the dense concentration of NPCs, unique textures, and lighting effects. To work around hardware limitations, the developers used a clever trick. Instead of spawning and despawning NPCs as they moved between locations, the game would fade them out, teleport them to a new spot, and fade them back in. This saved memory by reusing the same NPC models without the performance cost of loading new assets. Lead programmer Jason Fader explained that this technique allowed the strip to feel more populated and alive than the engine should have been able to handle. Players rarely noticed the trick because it was executed smoothly, but it was one of many behind-the-scenes optimizations that kept the console versions from crashing under the weight of the strip's ambitions. The NPC recycling system is a great example of creative problem-solving under technical constraints. Obsidian couldn't add more NPCs, so they made the existing ones work harder. The cut NCR Embassy encounters hidden in the game files are references to a multi-stage questline involving the NCR Embassy on the Strip, where Ambassador Crocker would have multiple timed encounters with the player. According to cut dialogue and quest stages, the second meeting would trigger if you returned to the embassy 7 days after the first encounter, and a third meeting would occur 7 days after that. These encounters would have added depth to Crocker's character and the NCR's espionage efforts against Mr. House and the Legion. The reason for the cuts is unclear, but it likely came down to the time crunch. Obsidian simply couldn't finish and test every quest line they had planned. The timed encounter system shows that the developers experimented with more dynamic, calendar-based events that would have made the world feel more reactive to the passage of time. While this specific content didn't make the final cut, similar ideas appeared in DLCs like Dead Money, where certain events only trigger after rest periods or specific intervals. Gamora's cut underground levels. Gamora, the sleazy casino run by the Omertas, was originally designed with additional underground levels that would have expanded the How Little We Know quest significantly. Josh Sawyer revealed in interviews that the extra floors were cut because Gamora was already large and confusing to navigate, and adding more levels would have detracted from the quest pacing. There's even an unused cell in the game files called Gamora Placeholder that has a completely different visual design from the final version, suggesting the casino went through major revisions during development. The cuts are noticeable if you pay attention. Some doors lead nowhere, and certain NPC dialogue references areas that don't exist in the final game. Despite the trimmed content, Gamora remains one of the most memorable locations on the Strip, with its neon-drenched debauchery and morally questionable questline. The cut levels serve as a reminder of how much content Obsidian had to sacrifice to meet the 18-month deadline, leaving players to wonder what the full vision for each casino might have looked like. Malcolm Holmes and the persistent NPC system. Malcolm Holmes, the eccentric NPC who tracks you down to talk about sunset sarsaparilla bottle caps, is one of the best demonstrations of Bethesda's creation engine capabilities. Josh Sawyer explained that Holmes is marked as a persistent character, meaning he can be active anywhere in the world as long as certain conditions are met. Once you collect a star bottle cap, Holmes begins his journey across the Mojave to find you, and he'll eventually appear no matter where you are. This system also governs Legion Assassin squads, NCR hit squads, and other random encounters that hunt the player based on faction reputation. The persistent NPC feature allowed Obsidian to create dynamic, emergent stories. Sawyer shared an anecdote about Legion assassins following him across the map for hours, only to attack when he rested at the 188 trading post, triggering a massive battle that killed multiple vendor NPCs. These unscripted moments made the world feel alive and reactive, with consequences that rippled outward from player choices in unpredictable ways. Malcolm Holmes might seem like a quirky side character, but his implementation represents sophisticated AI systems working beneath the surface. The carnage at the 188 trading post. Josh Sawyer's story about the 188 trading post massacre is one of the most memorable examples of New Vegas's emergent gameplay. Late in one of his playthroughs, Sawyer rested at the trading post, not realizing Legion assassins had been tracking him across the entire map for in-game days. The moment he woke up, the assassins attacked, but so did the NCR heavy troopers stationed nearby, as well as every NCR allied NPC in the area. By the time the dust settled, almost everyone was dead. Vendors, quest givers, and guards all lay scattered across the pavement, with only Sawyer and one wounded assassin left standing. He killed the last enemy, looted what he could, and moved on, leaving the trading post a ghost town. This kind of chaos wasn't scripted. It was the natural result of overlapping systems, persistent enemies, faction alliances, NPC schedules, colliding in real time. The fact that major NPCs could permanently die without breaking the game shows Obsidian's commitment to consequence and player freedom, even when it meant losing content. Sawyer's anecdote became legendary among fans as proof that New Vegas's world was genuinely dynamic, not just a theme park ride on rails. The 65,000 lines of dialogue. Fallout New Vegas contains approximately 65,000 lines of voice dialogue, making it one of the most script-heavy games of its generation. To put that in perspective, a feature-length film typically has around 7,000 words of dialogue. New Vegas has nearly 10 times that, spread across hundreds of characters, branching, conversations, and optional content most players will never see in a single playthrough. Writing and recording this amount of dialogue in 18 months was a monumental task, requiring a large writing team, strict pipeline management, and extensive voice recording sessions. The sheer volume also meant that some actors, like Yuri Lowenthal, recorded over 1,800 pages of script just for background NPCs and guards. The density of dialogue is one reason New Vegas feels so reactive. Almost every action, faction, reputation shift, or companion in your party triggers unique NPC responses. This attention to detail made the world feel lived in and responsive, with characters acknowledging your choices in ways that few other open-world RPGs have matched. The 65,000 line count is both a technical achievement and a creative flex, proving that Obsidian could deliver narrative depth even under crushing deadlines. The aim-down sights feature one of the most significant mechanical improvements Obsidian added to New Vegas was the aim-down sights ADS feature, allowing players to use iron sights or scopes on weapons for more precise shooting. Fallout 3 only had a vague zoom function, which made gunplay feel clunky and imprecise, especially for players coming from other first-person shooters. The ADS system required new animations for every weapon in the game, as well as rebalanced accuracy and damage calculations to account for the increased precision. This seemingly small change dramatically improved the feel of combat, making guns feel more like guns and less like stat sticks. It also opened up new playstyles, like dedicated snipers and marksmen, who could now reliably land headshots at long range. The feature was so well received that Bethesda carried it forward into Fallout 4, making it a permanent part of the series' identity. Obsidian's willingness to tinker with core mechanics in a licensed game showed their confidence and their understanding of what the Fallout community wanted: better shooting, deeper systems, and more player control. The faction and disguise systems. New Vegas introduced a faction reputation system that tracked your standing with every major group in the Mojave, from the NCR and Legion to smaller factions like the Khans, Powder Gangers, and Brotherhood of Steel. This system was paired with a disguise mechanic, allowing you to wear faction armor to blend in with enemies or gain access to restricted areas. If you wore Legion armor, Legion NPCs would treat you as an ally until your disguise was blown, but NCR soldiers would attack on sight. The system added layers of strategy and role-playing that Fallout 3 lacked. You could infiltrate enemy camps, gather intelligence, and escape without firing a shot. However, the disguise system had quirks. Companions didn't disguise themselves, meaning they could blow your cover, and certain NPCs with high perception could see through your disguise. These limitations made the system feel grounded and tactical rather than a cheap exploit. The faction reputation and disguise mechanics became one of New Vegas's most praised features, giving players more tools to navigate the Mojave's complex political landscape without defaulting to violence. It also reinforced the game's central theme: in a world full of competing ideologies, identity and allegiance are fluid, and survival often depends on knowing when to blend in and when to stand out. The Pioneer Saloon is a real location. Good Springs, the starting town in Fallout New Vegas, is based on a real place in Nevada, and the Prospector Saloon in the game is a direct recreation of the real-life Pioneer Saloon. Obsidian developers visited the actual location during research trips, taking reference photos of the building's exterior and interior layout. The real Pioneer Saloon has the same two-room layout as its in-game counterpart, with a main bar area and a back room. Even the windows and doors match the real building's architecture. The developer's attention to detail extended to the surrounding town. The general store next to the saloon in-game is positioned exactly where it sits in real life. This commitment to authenticity made Goodsprings feel grounded and believable, giving players a sense that the Mojave Wasteland was built on the bones of a real American landscape. The Pioneer Saloon has since become a pilgrimage site for Fallout fans who visit to take photos, meet other fans, and soak in the atmosphere that inspired the game's opening hours. The real-life bar even hosts Fallout-themed events, cementing its place in gaming history as the spot where the Courier's journey truly begins. The real Lucky 38, the Stratosphere Tower. The Lucky 38 Casino, Mr. House's fortress at the center of the New Vegas Strip, is directly inspired by the real-life Stratosphere Tower in Las Vegas. Both structures loom over the Strip, dominating the skyline with their height and futuristic design. The Stratosphere is the tallest observation tower in the United States, and its presence in the Las Vegas skyline makes it instantly recognizable. Exactly the kind of landmark Obsidian wanted for House's headquarters. In the game, the Lucky 38 is sealed off for 200 years until the Courier arrives, mirroring House's isolation and control. The building's design, with its towering needle and circular top floor, makes it feel like a symbol of old-world ambition and pre-war excess. Players can see the Lucky 38 from almost anywhere on the Strip, a constant reminder of House's watchful presence and the power he wields through his Securitron army. The decision to base House's tower on a real Las Vegas landmark helped ground the game's more fantastical elements, reminding players that even in the Mojave Wasteland, echoes of the real world still linger. The Ultra Luxe and the Bellagio, the Ultra Luxe Casino, home of the cannibalistic White Glove Society, was directly inspired by the Bellagio Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, one of the most famous luxury hotels on the real Strip. The Bellagio is known for its elegance, high-stakes gambling, and iconic fountains, all of which are reflected in the Ultra Luxe's upscale aesthetic and strict dress code. Obsidian took the Bellagio's reputation for excess and refinement, then twisted it into something sinister. Beneath the polished veneer and gourmet cuisine, the White Gloves are former cannibals struggling with their dark past, and some members want to return to their old ways. The Ultra Luxe's quest, beyond the beef, forces players to navigate this moral tightrope, deciding whether to expose the society's secrets, join their conspiracy, or manipulate events for personal gain. The choice to base the casino on the Bellagio adds an extra layer of satire. The real Bellagio represents the height of Vegas luxury, while the Ultra Luxe reveals the moral rot that can hide behind wealth and sophistication. It's a perfect example of how New Vegas uses real-world inspiration to comment on excess, decadence, and the fragility of civilization. Fremont Street and Freeside's design. Freeside, the impoverished slum surrounding the New Vegas Strip, draws heavy inspiration from the older, less polished parts of downtown Las Vegas, particularly Fremont Street. In real life, Fremont Street is the historic heart of Las Vegas, home to vintage casinos like the Golden Nugget and the Four Queens, which have a grittier, more nostalgic feel compared to the modern mega resorts on the Strip. Obsidian used this contrast to create Freeside as a place where the dream of Vegas has curdled into desperation and decay. The area is controlled by local gangs like the Kings, populated by squatters and refugees, and patrolled by makeshift militias. Unlike the walled-off, sanitized strip where Mr. House maintains order through Securitrons, Freeside is lawless and dangerous, reflecting the inequality and social stratification that define post-apocalyptic Vegas. The Atomic Wrangler Casino in Freeside mirrors the smaller, seedier casinos found on Fremont Street, offering cheap thrills and questionable services to people who can't afford the strip. This geographic and social divide reinforces one of New Vegas's core themes: the gap between the haves and have-nots, and the fragile systems that keep the peace in a world constantly on the brink of collapse. Red Rock Canyon's real-world counterpart, Red Rock Canyon, home of the great cons in Fallout New Vegas, is based on the real Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area just west of Las Vegas. The real location features dramatic red sandstone formations, desert vegetation, and sweeping vistas that make it one of the most visually stunning areas in Nevada. Obsidian used the real canyon's geography as a template for the Khan's hideout, positioning it as a natural fortress surrounded by cliffs and narrow passes that make it defensible against attacks. The in-game version simplifies the terrain for gameplay purposes, but it retains a sense of isolation and rugged beauty that defines the real location. The Khan's choice to settle in Red Rock Canyon reflects their outcast status. They've been pushed to the margins of the Mojave by the NCR and other factions, forced to survive in harsh, remote territory. The real Red Rock Canyon is a popular hiking and climbing destination, and visiting it gives players a deeper appreciation for the environmental storytelling in New Vegas. The developers didn't just slap a generic desert backdrop onto the map, they studied the real Nevada landscape and used its features to enhance faction identities and quest design. Lake Mead's ecological importance. Lake Mead, the massive reservoir created by Hoover Dam, plays a crucial role in both the real world and in Fallout New Vegas. In reality, Lake Mead provides water and hydroelectric power to millions of people across Nevada, Arizona, and California, making it one of the most important infrastructure projects in the American West. In New Vegas, control of Hoover Dam, and by extension Lake Mead, is the central conflict driving the entire game. The NCR, Caesar's Legion, and Mr. House all recognize that whoever controls the dam controls the region's water and electricity, giving them the power to expand their territory and sustain their populations. The game's ending hinges on the second battle of Hoover Dam, where the fate of the Mojave is decided in a climactic confrontation. By grounding the conflict in a real resource scarcity issue, Obsidian made the stakes feel tangible and relatable. Lake Mead also serves as an environmental storytelling device. Its depleted water levels in 2281 reflect centuries of neglect and overuse, mirroring real-world concerns about drought and resource management in the Southwest. The lake isn't just a map location, it's a symbol of survival, power, and the fragile infrastructure that separates civilization from collapse. The Neon Museum Connection. The Neon Museum in Las Vegas, which preserves iconic vintage signs from the city's history, influenced the aesthetic of Fallout New Vegas in subtle but important ways. The museum's collection includes signs from demolished casinos, motels, and businesses, offering a nostalgic glimpse at the neon-soaked glory days of mid-century Las Vegas. Obsidian drew on this visual language to create the strip's retro-futuristic vibe, filling the game with flickering neon signs, vintage marquees, and Art Deco architecture that evoke the 1950s Rat Pack era. The developers understood that Las Vegas is a city obsessed with its own mythology, constantly reinventing itself while clinging to romanticized versions of the past. In New Vegas, Mr. House embodies this tension. He's trying to resurrect the old world's glamour and excess, preserving pre-war Vegas as a monument to his own vision of progress. The Neon Museum's real-world mission of preserving history against the forces of demolition and decay mirrors House's in-game efforts to keep New Vegas alive in a world that has moved on. By referencing this cultural institution, Obsidian added another layer of meaning to the game's exploration of memory, nostalgia, and the cost of trying to reclaim a lost golden age. The Atomic Testing Museum exhibit. In November 2025, the National Atomic Testing Museum in Las Vegas will open a Fallout exhibit cementing the connection between the real-world history of nuclear testing and the fictional universe of the games. The museum, which documents the history of nuclear weapons testing at the Nevada test site, is a natural fit for Fallout's themes of atomic warfare and post-apocalyptic survival. New Vegas references this history directly. The game is set in the shadow of nuclear testing, with locations like the Searchlight irradiated ruins serving as reminders of the destructive power of atomic weapons. The exhibit will showcase props, concept art, and behind-the-scenes material from the Fallout series, giving fans a chance to explore the real history that inspired the game's dark satire of Cold War paranoia and atomic optimism. The museum's location in Las Vegas also means visitors can combine their trip with real-world Fallout pilgrimages to places like Good Springs, Primm, and Hoover Dam, creating a full immersive experience that blends fiction and history. The exhibit is a testament to how deeply Fallout New Vegas has embedded itself in the cultural fabric of Las Vegas, transforming a video game into a lens through which people understand the city's unique relationship with nuclear power and apocalyptic imagery. Chris Avalone's character design philosophy. Chris Avallone, one of Obsidian's most celebrated writers and designers, brought a specific philosophy to character creation in Fallout New Vegas. Start with a moment or event you want to create, then build the character around it. In an interview with Lightspeed magazine, Avallone explained that he approaches characters by asking what emotional or narrative beat he wants to deliver, then reverse engineers a personality, backstory, and motivation that makes that moment land with maximum impact. For example, with Ulysses in the Lonesome Road DLC, Avallone wanted to create a confrontation where the player is forced to reckon with unintended consequences and the weight of their past actions. Ulysses was designed to be a mirror of the Courier, another Wasteland messenger whose life was destroyed by the player's unknowing delivery of a doomsday device. Every line of Ulysses' dialogue, every symbol he references, and every choice he offers the player is engineered to make the final confrontation feel personal and philosophically weighty. Avallone's method contrasts with writers who start with a character concept and then figure out what to do with them. Instead, he works backward from the story beat, ensuring that every character serves a specific narrative purpose. This approach helps explain why New Vegas's characters feel so purposeful and memorable. They're not just NPCs with backstories, they're narrative tools designed to provoke specific reactions and force difficult choices. Josh Sawyer's location and character assignment process. Josh Sawyer, New Vegas's project director, revealed in a YouTube video that the game's locations and characters were developed through a collaborative but structured process. Lead designer John Gonzalez would create the initial concepts for major locations like the casinos and their associated factions, then present them to the team for feedback. Other designers would pitch ideas for how to interpret those concepts or suggest changes, and Gonzalez would incorporate the feedback into the final designs. Once the broad strokes were set, individual designers would be assigned specific areas or characters to flesh out. Sawyer gave examples. He might mandate that a certain NPC like Ambassador Crocker had to be located at the NCR embassy for quest logic reasons, but the designer assigned to that character would determine their personality, dialogue, and role in the story. For companions, Sawyer often matched writers with characters he thought they'd excel at bringing to life. For instance, Chris Avallone was assigned Cass, Rose of Sharon Cassidy, because Sawyer believed Avallone could write a tough, loyal, but deeply flawed female character who felt like a regular person rather than a heroic archetype. This assignment process balanced top-down structure with bottom-up creativity, giving designers ownership over their content while ensuring everything fit into the larger narrative framework. The result was a game where every location and character felt distinct and purposeful, yet still cohesive within the Mojave's complex political landscape. Veronica's creation and design, Veronica Santangelo, the Brotherhood of Steel scribe and punching enthusiast, was designed by Josh Sawyer with a specific goal in mind: create a companion who represented the human side of the Brotherhood's isolationist crisis. Sawyer wanted a character who loved the Brotherhood but also recognized its flaws, someone who dreamed of a life outside the bunker but felt trapped by loyalty and tradition. Veronica's request for a dress, a seemingly trivial quest objective, becomes a powerful symbol of her desire for normalcy and femininity in a culture that values only martial prowess and technological hoarding. Felicia Day's voice performance added a playful, sarcastic energy that made Veronica feel like a real person, rather than a mouthpiece for faction politics. The companion quest, I Could Make You Care, forces players to confront the Brotherhood's future. Should they embrace change and openness, or double down on their secretive, elitist ways? Veronica's personal arc mirrors this larger question, and depending on your choices, she either finds hope in reform or loses faith entirely. Sawyer's decision to focus Veronica's story on identity, belonging, and the tension between tradition and progress made her one of the most emotionally resonant companions in New Vegas, proving that great character writing doesn't need grand gestures. Sometimes a simple dress is enough. Lily Bowen's tragic design, Lily Bowen, the friendly Nightkin grandmother, was created to explore the terrible side effects of being a Nightkin and the toll that prolonged stealth boy use takes on the mind. Josh Sawyer explained that the team wanted a companion who wasn't just another tough fighter or cynical survivor. They wanted someone whose tragedy was visible in every interaction, someone whose mental illness shaped their entire identity. Lily's schizophrenia manifests as a second voice. Leo, a memory of her master, the leader of the super mutants, who she both loves and resents. Her companion quest forces players to make an impossible choice: keep Lily on medication that dulls her memories of her human grandchildren, or take her off the meds and risk worsening her psychosis. There's no good answer, only trade-offs and heartbreak. Lily's design reflects New Vegas's willingness to tackle difficult subjects like mental illness, identity, and the ethics of medical intervention without offering easy solutions. She's also one of the few companions whose condition visibly impacts gameplay. Her stealth field ability and combat behavior change depending on her mental state. Lily's presence in the party constantly reminds players that the Mojave's factions and conflicts have real human and super mutant costs, and that not every problem can be solved with a speech check or a well-placed bullet. Boone's first recon backstory, Craig Boone, the stoic ex-NCR sniper, was written to embody the psychological cost of war and the moral compromises soldiers make in the name of duty. His backstory reveals that his first recon unit was ordered to fire on civilian targets during the NCR's campaigns, and Boone followed those orders despite his misgivings. This guilt, combined with the later kidnapping and mercy killing of his pregnant wife Carla, has left Boone emotionally shattered. His companion quest, One for My Baby, is one of the darkest in the game, culminating in a hunt for the person who sold Carla to the Legion. The quest's outcome depends on player choice. You can help Boone get revenge, or you can manipulate events for your own gain, potentially pointing him at the wrong target. Boone's character design was intentional. Josh Sawyer and the writing team wanted a companion who represented the NCR's flaws and the human cost of expansion. Someone whose loyalty to the Republic was unshakable, but also deeply scarred by what that loyalty demanded. Boone's terse dialogue and thousand-yard stare aren't just character quirks. They're symptoms of PTSD and survivor's guilt. His presence in the party adds weight to every NCR-related quest, reminding players that the faction they might be supporting has blood on its hands, and that soldiers like Boone carry that burden for the rest of their lives. Cass as the regular woman Rose of Sharon Cassidy, better known as Cass, was designed by Chris Avallone and Josh Sawyer to be a regular woman in a world full of larger-than-life characters. Sawyer explained that he wanted a companion who wasn't a super soldier, a mad scientist, or a mystical figure, just someone tough, loyal, flawed, and trying to survive in a world that doesn't give a damn about her. Cass runs a failing caravan business, drinks too much, and has a sharp tongue that gets her in trouble, but she's also fiercely independent and surprisingly vulnerable beneath the bravado. Her companion quest, Heartache by the Number, uncovers a conspiracy where the Crimson Caravan and Van Graffs colluded to destroy smaller competitors, including Cass's family business. The quest offers two paths: expose the conspiracy through legal channels, or burn both companies to the ground with Cass at your side. Avallone's writing gives Cass a distinct voice. She's quotable, funny, and real in a way that makes her feel like someone you'd actually meet in a desert bar. The decision to make her an ordinary character, by Mojave standards, was a deliberate counter to the game's more fantastical elements, grounding the story in human struggles like economic ruin, alcoholism, and the search for justice in a lawless land. Eddie's emotional arc in Lonesome Road. Eddie, the floating iBot companion, started as a simple utility robot. It could repair equipment, provide combat support, and serve as a fast travel beacon. But in the Lonesome Road DLC, designer Eric Fenstermaker and the writing team gave Eddie a tragic backstory that transformed it into one of the game's most emotionally affecting characters. As you explore the Divide, Eddie plays audio logs revealing its creation by an Enclave scientist named Whitley, who genuinely cared for the little robot and saw it as more than just military hardware. Whitley's logs detail his struggles to protect Eddie from being weaponized, his hopes that it would find its way to Navarro and deliver critical data, and his final desperate message telling Eddie to find someone else to help. By the end of Lonesome Road, you realize Eddie has been carrying its creator's last wish across the wasteland for years, a loyal messenger who never forgot its mission even after the Enclave fell. The DLC's climax offers a devastating choice. Should Eddie sacrifice itself to stop the nuclear launch, or should you find another way? The fact that players genuinely agonize over a floating robot's fate speaks to how effectively the DLC humanizes Eddie. proving that good writing can make you care about even the most mechanical companion. Rex's brain transplant mechanics. Rex, the king's cyber dog, suffers from a degenerative neurological condition that requires a brain transplant to survive. The quest, nothing but a hound dog, sends players across the Mojave to find a suitable donor brain, and the choice you make permanently changes Rex's combat stats and personality. You can choose Violetta's brain, a loyal guard dog, Lupa's brain, a violent fighter, or Old Lady Gibson's brain, a fast, cunning coyote. Each brain offers different bonuses. Violetta's increases Rex's damage threshold, making him tankier. Lupa's increases his attack damage, making him more aggressive, and Old Lady Gibson's brain increases his speed and attack rate, making him a fast hit-and-run fighter. This mechanical branching is rare among companion quests. Most offer narrative choices, but Rex's quest has tangible gameplay consequences that persist for the rest of the game. The quest also raises unsettling questions about identity and consciousness. Is Rex still Rex with a different brain? Or has he become a different dog wearing Rex's body? The game doesn't answer these questions, leaving players to wrestle with the implications of their choice. It's a small quest in the grand scheme of New Vegas, but it exemplifies the game's commitment to making player choices matter both narratively and mechanically. The Kings and Elvis impersonation culture. The Kings, the gang that controls Freeside, are one of Fallout New Vegas's most inspired satirical creations. They're based on the real-world phenomenon of Elvis Presley impersonators who flooded Las Vegas after the King of Rock and Roll's death in 1977, attempting to keep his legacy alive through tribute performances. In New Vegas, the Kings discovered a holotape school teaching the King's style and mannerisms, and they adopted his aesthetic wholesale, not realizing they're imitating a performer rather than an actual historical king. This cargo cult behavior, where people imitate symbols they don't fully understand, runs throughout Fallout's world, but the Kings take it to absurd heights with their pompadour hairstyles, leather jackets, and Elvis-style speech patterns. The King himself, the gang's charismatic leader, voiced by David Hess, is a surprisingly nuanced character. He's theatrical and over the top, but he genuinely cares about Freeside's residents and wants to protect them from both NCR expansionism and local predators. The quest GI Blues explores tensions between the Kings and the NCR, offering multiple resolutions that reflect the player's diplomatic skills and factional allegiances. The Kings are funny, but they're not a joke. They represent how culture gets transmitted, distorted, and reinvented in the post-apocalypse, and how identity can be built on misunderstanding and still have real meaning. The White Legs cargo cult of Ulysses. The White Legs tribe in the Honest Hearts DLC are a cargo cult, a group that imitates symbols and behaviors they don't fully understand in hopes of gaining power. Specifically, they worship Ulysses, the mysterious courier who taught them how to fight and gave them Old World weapons before abandoning them. The White Legs adopted Ulysses' dreadlocks, trying to replicate his appearance as a form of reverence, but they have no understanding of the cultural or historical significance of the hairstyle. They just know it made their teacher look powerful. This blind imitation extends to their language, which mixes English with tribal cant and broken phrases they picked up from Ulysses and other outsiders. The White Legs are brutal and effective fighters, but their identity is entirely constructed around mimicking someone else, making them a tragic reflection of how easily culture can be appropriated and distorted. Their quest to destroy the new Canaanites and claim Zion Canyon is driven by a promise from Caesar's Legion. If they wipe out Joshua Graham's people, they'll be allowed to join the Legion, The Whitelegs don't realize they're being used as disposable shock troops, and their loyalty to symbols they don't understand will likely lead to their destruction. The tribe's design comments on colonization, cultural erasure, and the dangers of building identity on borrowed power, themes that resonate throughout the Fallout series but are especially sharp in Honest Heart's exploration of post-apocalyptic tribalism. The survivalist environmental storytelling Randall Clark, known as the Survivalist or the Father in the Caves, never appears alive in Honest Hearts, but his story is one of the DLC's emotional cores. His tale is told entirely through terminal entries scattered across Zion Canyon, which players can choose to read or ignore entirely. Clark was a soldier on leave in Zion when the bombs fell, and he survived the initial blast only to watch everyone he loved die from radiation, disease, or violence. Over decades, he became a hermit, a ghost who protected the Sorrows tribe from a distance without ever revealing himself. He left supplies, killed threats, and watched over them like a guardian angel, all while struggling with grief, loneliness, and the question of whether his survival even mattered. By the time you find his skeleton in a cave, accompanied by his final log entries, you've pieced together a life defined by loss and quiet heroism. The survivalist's rifle, a unique weapon lying beside his body, is one of the best rewards in the DLC, but the real prize is the story itself, a masterclass in environmental storytelling that proves you don't need cutscenes or voice acting to create unforgettable characters. Randall Clark's arc is a tragedy, but it's also a testament to resilience and the human need to protect others, even when no one knows you exist. Dr. Mobius's secret heroism. Dr. Mobius, the apparent villain of Old World Blues, is actually the DLC's unsung hero. The entire time he's threatening you and playing up his evil persona, he's secretly working to keep the other think tank scientists trapped in the big MT crater, preventing them from escaping and unleashing their dangerous experiments on the Mojave. Mobius realized long ago that his fellow scientists had become insane and dangerous, their minds so detached from reality that they saw humans as walking bags of organs and the outside world as a laboratory to exploit. By positioning himself as a threat, Mobius gave the think tank a target to obsess over, distracting them from their plans to break out and conquer. His evil robot scorpions, which players fight throughout the DLC, were meant to reinforce the illusion that he's a villain worth stopping. When you finally confront Mobius and learn the truth, his goofy, drug-addled persona takes on tragic weight. He's been alone for centuries, pretending to be someone he's not, all to protect a world that will never know what he sacrificed. The revelation recontextualizes the entire DLC, transforming a campy B-movie plot into a meditation on responsibility, madness, and the burden of being the only sane person in an asylum. Mobius's story is one of Old World, Blues' best twists, and it works because the DLC earns it through careful foreshadowing and environmental clues that players might miss on a first playthrough. The think tank's pre-war atrocities, while Old World Blues presents the think tank scientists as comedic villains obsessed with penises and teddy bears, the DLC doesn't shy away from revealing their pre-war crimes. Terminal entries and audio logs throughout Big MT detail horrific experiments conducted before the bombs fell. Unwilling test subjects were lobotomized, kidnapped from nearby towns, or exposed to dangerous technologies that killed them slowly. The scientists performed these experiments with bureaucratic detachment, viewing human suffering as acceptable collateral damage in the pursuit of scientific progress. Dr. Klein mentions casually that they went through hundreds of test subjects as if people were consumable resources rather than living beings. Dr. Zero admits they kidnapped people from local communities, erasing them from existence to fuel their research. This dark history reframes the think tank's current insanity. They were monsters long before they became brains in jars, and their transformation into delusional cyborgs isn't a tragedy so much as karmic justice. The DLC uses this revelation to critique the military-industrial complex and the ethical bankruptcy of Cold War-era science, where national security concerns justified almost any atrocity. The think tank's pre-war crimes also make Dr. Mobius's decision to trap them more understandable. These aren't just mad scientists, they're war criminals who would absolutely weaponize the Mojave if given the chance. Sin City was the original title. Fallout New Vegas was originally pitched to Bethesda. Obsidian CEO Fergus Urquhart revealed in a 2017 Eurogamer interview that the name was changed very quickly during early development, first to Fallout Vegas, and finally settling on Fallout New Vegas to better distinguish it as a distinct entry in the franchise. The Sin City title was deemed too generic and didn't capture the post-apocalyptic reinvention of Las Vegas that Obsidian wanted to explore. The name change also helped signal to players that this wasn't just a game about gambling and neon lights. It was about rebuilding civilization in the shadow of the old world, with the New Vegas representing a rebirth rather than a nostalgic look backward. Interestingly, the developers kept the core Sin City vibe intact through the various casino factions, the moral ambiguity of Mr. House's vision, and the constant tension between law and lawlessness that defines the Mojave Wasteland. The Goodfellas, inspiration for the opening. The iconic opening of Fallout New Vegas, where the Courier is shot in the head and left in a shallow grave, was directly inspired by the film Goodfellas. During development, someone on the team referenced the scene where mobsters take someone out into the desert to execute them, and the idea immediately clicked with the Las Vegas noir setting Obsidian was building. The image of being whacked and buried in the Mojave Desert felt like the perfect setup for a revenge story with moral complexity. Do you hunt down Benny for justice, or do you let it go and focus on the bigger political picture? The team loved how this opening immediately placed the player in a position of vulnerability and gave them a personal stake in the story, unlike Fallout 3's slow vault escape. Chris Avallone is credited with pitching the specific detail of being shot in the head, which became the game's most memorable story beat and allowed the developers to explore themes of identity, memory, and second chances. The shallow grave opening also served a practical purpose. It explained why the Courier starts at level 1 with no equipment, providing an in-universe justification for the RPG reset. The sink's appliances as lonely prisoners. The appliances in the sink, your player home in Old World Blues, were programmed with personalities as a joke by big MT scientists, but after 200 years of isolation, they have developed genuine neuroses and existential crises. Muggy, the mug washing robot, is obsessed with collecting mugs because it's his only program purpose, and he's desperate for validation. The toaster is genocidal, harboring a burning hatred for all walking toasters, humans, and fantasizing about world domination. The light switch is lonely and desperate for attention, clinging to any interaction because switching lights on and off is his entire existence. The biological research station is cheerful and helpful, but occasionally lets slip disturbing details about the experiments it was designed to facilitate. These appliances aren't just comic relief, they're prisoners trapped in eternal servitude to functions they can't escape. Their personalities have calcified over centuries into exaggerated caricatures of their original programming, showing what happens when AI is left alone for too long with nothing but its core directives. The sync works as both a humorous player hub and a melancholy meditation on purpose, consciousness, and what it means to be trapped in a role you didn't choose. Players often find themselves genuinely caring about these ridiculous characters, which speaks to Old World Blues' strange, tonal genius. Ulysses' symbol, heavy dialogue. Ulysses, the antagonist of Lonesome Road, is one of the most divisive characters in Fallout New Vegas, largely because of his dense, metaphor-heavy dialogue. Every conversation with Ulysses is packed with references to flags, roads, symbols, history, and the meaning of nationhood in the post-apocalypse. He speaks in elaborate metaphors, comparing the Courier to a storm, the Divide to a wound, and the old world's flags to ghosts that haunt the wasteland. Chris Avallone wrote Ulysses this way. Intentionally, he wanted a character who thought deeply about history and meaning, someone who'd spent years alone in the Divide, contemplating the nature of civilization and identity. Avallone has said that Ulysses represents the dangers of dwelling too much on the past and becoming paralyzed by symbolism rather than acting in the present. Some players find Ulysses pretentious and long-winded, complaining that his speeches are exhausting and overly philosophical. Others appreciate the density of his dialogue, seeing him as a rare example of a game character who engages with big ideas and forces the player to think about their actions in thematic rather than purely mechanical terms. Ulysses' obsession with the Courier's role in destroying the Divide makes him a mirror. He's what the player could become if they fixated on revenge and guilt instead of moving forward. Whether you love or hate Ulysses, he's undeniably memorable, and his presence elevates Lonesome Road from a simple revenge story into something more philosophically ambitious. The Marked Men's factional memory. The Marked Men, the undead soldiers wandering the Divide and Lonesome Road, are former NCR and Legion troops who were caught in the nuclear detonation and subsequent storms that destroyed the region. What makes them truly tragic is that they've retained fragments of their factional loyalty even after losing their humanity. If you wear NCR armor, former NCR marked men are less likely to attack you immediately, while Legion-aligned marked men will target you aggressively. The reverse is true if you wear Legion gear. This behavioral detail suggests the marked men still remember who they served, even though their minds are shattered and their bodies are held together by radiation and sheer stubborn will. It's one of the DLC's most effective horror elements. These creatures aren't mindless zombies. They're people trapped in rotting flesh, still fighting a war they can barely remember. The Marked Men also drop holotapes and personal effects that reveal who they were before the disaster, letters to loved ones, military requisitions, personal journals. Reading these items while fighting the shambling corpses of their authors creates a powerful cognitive dissonance, reminding players that every enemy was once a person, with hopes, fears, and connections. The Marked Men embody Lonesome Road's central theme, the cost of war and the way conflict reduces people to symbols and casualties, erasing their humanity until only violence remains. The Courier's unknowing role in the Divide's destruction. One of Lonesome Road's most devastating revelations is that the Courier unknowingly caused the destruction of the Divide by delivering a package containing a detonator for dormant nuclear missiles. The Courier was just doing their job, following a delivery route and completing a contract, but their actions triggered a chain reaction that killed thousands of people and turned a thriving trade route into an irradiated hellscape. Ulysses witnessed the destruction and became obsessed with making the Courier understand the weight of their unintended consequences. This backstory reframes the entire game. Every quest you've completed, Every faction you've aided or destroyed has been shaped by a protagonist who doesn't even remember their most catastrophic mistake. The amnesia caused by Benny's bullet becomes tragically ironic. The courier was shot because they were carrying the platinum chip, but they can't remember they also carried Doomsday in their bag years earlier. The DLC forces players to grapple with guilt for actions they didn't consciously choose, raising questions about responsibility, intention, and whether ignorance excuses harm. It's a bold narrative move that could have backfired. Players might resent having a dark past imposed on their character, but it works because the game gives you multiple ways to respond to Ulysses' accusations, letting you define how the courier feels about their role in the tragedy. Lonesome Road's ending. Nuclear choices. The climax of Lonesome Road gives players control over nuclear missiles that can be launched at either the NCR, the Legion, both, or neither. This choice has real, permanent consequences. Nuking a faction creates new, high-level areas filled with dangerous enemies and rare loot, but it also tanks your reputation with the targeted faction and can lock you out of certain endings if your standing drops too low. The irradiated zones, the long 15 for NCR and dry wells for Legion, become some of the most challenging content in the game, filled with marked men and environmental hazards that test even max-level characters. The choice to nuke both, one or neither, also reflects your philosophical stance on the Mojave's future. Do you believe in destroying your enemies, even at the cost of innocent lives? Do you reject Ulysses' nihilistic view and refuse to launch, proving that history doesn't have to repeat? Or do you embrace the chaos and burn everything to start fresh? The nuclear choice is one of New Vegas's most explicit statements about player agency. You're given the tools to reshape the Mojave's political landscape through sheer destructive force, but the game doesn't tell you which choice is correct. It simply presents the option and lets you live with the consequences, trusting that players can handle moral complexity without being guided toward a predetermined, good ending. Eddie's sacrifice option. At the end of Lonesome Road, if you choose not to launch the nukes, you can sacrifice Eddie to shut down the missile system, saving countless lives but losing your companion permanently. This choice is emotionally devastating, especially after the audio logs throughout the DLC have humanized Eddie and revealed its tragic backstory. The sacrifice is framed as heroic. Eddie fulfills its original mission by protecting people, just as its creator Whitley hoped, but it's also heartbreaking because the little iBot has been your loyal companion since the early game. Players who've grown attached to Eddie often struggle with this decision, weighing the practical loss of a useful companion against the emotional weight of letting it die. Some players reload saves to find alternate solutions, unwilling to sacrifice Eddie even for the greater good. The choice works because it's optional. You can stop the launch without sacrificing Eddie if you have high enough science skill, or find another method. But the sacrifice option exists for players who want a more dramatic, emotionally charged ending. It's a small moment in the grand scheme of New Vegas, but it demonstrates how effective companion writing can make players care deeply about a floating robot with no face and minimal dialogue. The Courier's Duster customization. Lonesome Road rewards players with the Courier's Duster, a unique long coat whose design changes based on your faction reputation at the time you receive it. If you're idolized with the NCR, you get a duster with the NCR bear on the back. Idolized with Caesar's Legion earns you a Legion bold design. High reputation with the Brotherhood or other factions changes the design accordingly. And if you have no strong faction allegiance, you receive a neutral version with old world flag imagery. This customization is entirely cosmetic, The Duster's stats remain the same regardless of design, but it's a perfect example of New Vegas's commitment to reactivity and player identity. The Duster becomes a wearable statement of your political allegiances and moral choices, broadcasting to other NPCs and yourself which side of the Mojave's conflicts you've chosen. Mechanically, the Duster is one of the best light armor pieces in the game, offering solid defense without weighing you down, making it a popular endgame outfit. The design customization also encourages multiple playthroughs, as players want to see all the different coat variations. It's a small detail, but it reinforces the idea that the Courier's journey has shaped them, and by the end of Lonesome Road, they wear their choices literally on their back. The 18-month development pressure. The most obscure and important fact about Fallout New Vegas is the relentless time pressure Obsidian faced during development. Bethesda gave them just 18 months to create a full open-world RPG using the Fallout 3 engine, an almost impossibly tight timeline by modern CMOA standards. Most open-world games take 3 to 5 years to develop, but Obsidian had to design, write, voice, test, and polish an entire game in less than half that time. This crunch explains both the game's incredible density. Obsidian packed an astonishing amount of content, quests, and reactivity into that short window, and its infamous bugginess at launch. The team worked brutal hours, with leads like Josh Sawyer sleeping in the office and designers racing to finish quests days before submission. Deadlines. The pressure also forced difficult cuts. Entire quest lines, location, and characters were removed because there simply wasn't time to finish them. The Metacritic controversy adds another layer to this story. New Vegas scored an 84 on Metacritic, 1 point below the 85 threshold that would have triggered performance bonuses for the team. This meant Obsidian received no bonus pay despite delivering one of the generation's best RPGs under crushing conditions. The 18-month development cycle is a testament to Obsidian's skill and dedication, but it's also a cautionary tale about the human cost of unrealistic production schedules in the gaming industry. New Vegas succeeded despite the timeline, not because of it, and the fact that it's still beloved 15 years later speaks to the talent and passion of everyone who worked themselves to exhaustion to bring the Mojave to life. The Metacritic bonus controversy. One of the most infamous stories in Fallout New Vegas's history is the Metacritic bonus controversy that cost Obsidian a significant financial payout. According to the development contract with Bethesda, Obsidian would receive a bonus if New Vegas achieved a Metacritic score of 85 or higher. The game launched to critical acclaim and eventually scored an 84 on Metacritic, missing the bonus threshold by a single point. This meant that despite creating one of the most beloved RPGs of its generation, the development team received no performance bonus. Obsidian co-founder Chris Avallone later discussed this in interviews, noting the frustration of coming so close, but ultimately falling short due to the game's technical issues at launch, many of which stemmed from the brutal 18-month development timeline Bethesda had imposed. The controversy sparked discussions in the gaming industry about fair compensation, the arbitrary nature of Metacritic aggregation, and whether publishers should tie bonuses to review scores rather than sales figures or other metrics. Some critics who gave New Vegas lower scores specifically cited bugs and crashes, issues that could have been resolved with more development time or better post-launch support. The Metacritic incident became a rallying point for conversations about crunch, fair pay, and the power dynamics between publishers and developers. To this day, fans debate whether certain reviews were unfairly harsh and whether Obsidian deserved better treatment for delivering such an ambitious game under difficult circumstances. The cut Caesar's Legion suffers from a significant content imbalance compared to the NCR, and this wasn't by design, it was a casualty of the development timeline. Josh Sawyer and other developers have confirmed in interviews and forums that the Legion was supposed to have much more content, including Legion-controlled settlements where players could see their society functioning peacefully, more quests exploring their philosophy and governance, and non-combat NPCs that showed the civilian side of Caesar's empire. The final game presents the Legion almost entirely through military encounters and slave camps, making them feel one-dimensionally evil compared to the morally complex NCR. Cut content includes a Legion town called Dry Wells, later repurposed as the Irradiated Zone in Lonesome Road, expanded dialogue with Legion characters explaining their worldview, and quests that would have allowed female Courier characters to gain respect within the traditionally misogynistic Legion hierarchy. The lack of this content hurt the game's faction balance. While players who side with the NCR get to experience their bureaucracy, corruption, and attempts at democracy firsthand, Legion players mostly just commit atrocities and listen to Caesar philosophize about Hegelian dialectics. Sawyer has expressed regret about this imbalance, noting that the Legion could have been as morally complex as the other factions if time had permitted. Modders have spent years trying to restore and expand Legion content, but the core problem remains. One of New Vegas's 4 major factions was never fully realized, leaving a gap in the game's otherwise excellent factional storytelling. The strip's performance problems. The New Vegas strip was originally designed as a single, continuous area, but hardware limitations on the Xbox 360 and PS3 forced Obsidian to split it into 3 separate zones, connected by gates and loading screens. This decision was made late in development after performance testing revealed that the console versions couldn't handle the density of NPCs, lighting effects, and unique assets that developers wanted to pack onto the strip. The split broke immersion and made the strip feel smaller and less impressive than intended. Instead of a bustling casino district, you got isolated pockets separated by awkward gate transitions. Josh Sawyer later explained that the memory constraints were so severe that every additional NPC on the strip required cutting something else, leading to difficult choices about what to prioritize. The PC version benefits from mods that restore the strip to a single continuous zone, but even then, the area was designed with the split in mind, so fully realizing the original vision would have required rebuilding significant portions from scratch. The strip's performance problems are emblematic of New Vegas's entire development. Ambitious ideas constrained by technical limitations and time pressure, resulting in a final product that's brilliant but visibly compromised. The fact that the strip still manages to feel iconic despite these limitations is a testament to strong art direction and smart use of lighting, music, and environmental storytelling to create atmosphere even when the geometry and NPC count couldn't deliver the scale Obsidian originally envisioned. The 5 casinos that became 3. Early in development, the New Vegas Strip was planned to include 5 casinos instead of the 3 that shipped in the final game. Evidence for this comes from cut dialogue, unused assets, and developer interviews where they discuss scaling back the Strip's ambitions. The exact nature of the 2 cut casinos remains unclear. Some files suggest they were smaller gambling halls rather than faction headquarters, while other evidence points to more elaborate designs that would have rivaled the Tops, Gomorrah, and Ultra Lux in complexity. The decision to reduce the casino count was driven by the same performance concerns that forced the strip split into multiple zones. Each casino required unique interiors, NPCs, quests, and faction systems, and Obsidian simply didn't have the time or memory budget to finish 5 complete locations. The 3 casinos that remained, each representing a different Vegas archetype, rat pack mobsters, sleazy sex workers, and elite cannibals, were chosen because their associated quests and faction storylines were furthest along in development. The cut casinos would have added more variety and reinforced Mr. House's vision of New Vegas as a thriving entertainment empire. But their absence is one of the sacrifices Obsidian had to make to ship on time. Modders have occasionally attempted to create the missing casinos based on cut content and speculation, but without clear direction from the original developers, these remain fan interpretations rather than restored content. Freeside's original design, Freeside, like the Strip, was originally designed as a single continuous area but had to be split into 2 zones, Freeside North and Freeside South, due to console performance limitations. This split is even more jarring than the Strips because Freeside is supposed to feel like a sprawling, chaotic slum, and the loading screen gate in the middle breaks the illusion of a desperate, overcrowded district. The original design called for more NPCs populating the streets, beggars, squatters, refugees, and gang members, creating a sense of dangerous urban density. However, technical constraints forced Obsidian to reduce NPC counts dramatically, leaving Freeside feeling emptier than intended. Cut content includes additional side quests involving local residents, more interactions between the Kings and other Freeside factions, and environmental details that would have made the area feel more lived in. Despite these cuts, Freeside remains one of New Vegas's most memorable locations, largely because of strong quest design, the King's storyline, the Atomic Wrangler's seedy operations, and effective use of lighting and decay to sell the aesthetic of pre-war glamour turned to rot. On PC, mods that restore Freeside as a single zone and add more NPCs transform the area into something closer to the original vision, proving that the ideas were sound. Obsidian just couldn't execute them within console memory limits. The Hoover Dam battle's branching paths. The second Battle of Hoover Dam, New Vegas's climactic finale, features an so impressive amount of branching based on player choices throughout the game. Depending on which faction you sided with, which companions you recruited, which side quests you completed, and which faction leaders you left alive or killed, the battle can play out in dozens of different configurations. If you help the boomers, they provide aerial support with their restored bomber. If you spared the Brotherhood of Steel and allied with them, paladins in power armor join the fight. If you upgraded Mr. House's Securitron army, waves of advanced robots turn the tide of battle. Each faction you aided or destroyed changes who appears on the battlefield and which side they support. Companions you've befriended give inspiring speeches or provide tactical advantages, while companions you ignored or mistreated might not show up at all. The NCR and Legion battle strategies change based on which commanders are alive and whether you completed their side objectives. This level of reactivity required meticulous planning and scripting. Each permutation needed custom dialogue, enemy spawns, and victory conditions. The result is one of the most personalized endings in RPG history, where no 2 players experience quite the same finale. The battle's branching structure also reinforces New Vegas's core theme. Your choices throughout the Mojave matter, and the ending is earned through the relationships you built and the factions you supported or destroyed along the way. The sliding ending narration system. After the Hoover Dam battle, New Vegas delivers one of gaming's most comprehensive ending slideshows, with Ron Perlman narrating the consequences of your choices across dozens of locations, factions, and characters. The ending isn't a single cutscene. It's a dynamically generated sequence that pulls from hundreds of possible slides based on quest completions, faction standings, and NPC outcomes. Each major location, Good Springs, Prim, Novak, the Brotherhood, the Cons, Freeside, West Side, etc., gets its own slide explaining what happened after the war, and these slides change based on specific actions you took or didn't take. If you help the town of Prim choose a new sheriff, the slide reflects which option you picked: Myers, the NCR, or Prim Slim, and each choice leads to different long-term outcomes. If you ignored Prim entirely, you get a different slide showing the town falling into chaos. This system extends to companions, minor factions, and even individual NPCs whose quest lines you completed. The sheer number of permutations means that comparing ending slides with other players often reveals choices and consequences you never knew existed. The ending slideshow became a signature feature of Obsidian RPGs, later refined in games like Pillars of Eternity. But New Vegas's implementation remains the gold standard for showing players that their choices had weight and meaning. It's a fitting conclusion to a game built around player agency, giving you a comprehensive report card that validates or condemns every decision you made across 50-plus hours of gameplay. The Wild Wasteland Toggle Decision. The Wild Wasteland trait was one of the most controversial design decisions in New Vegas, and it almost didn't make it into the final game. The trait enables dozens of pop culture references, absurdist encounters, and comedic Easter eggs, but it also replaces certain normal encounters with joke versions, meaning players who take the trait are locked out of some serious content. Josh Sawyer explained that the team debated whether to include Wild Wasteland at all, with some designers arguing it broke immersion while others felt it honored Fallout's tradition of dark humor and self-awareness. The compromise was making it an optional trait you choose at character creation, allowing players to decide how much absurdity they wanted in their post-apocalypse. However, this created a design challenge. Every Wild Wasteland encounter needed a normal version for players who didn't take the trait, effectively doubling the work. The most significant trade-off involves the alien blaster. Wild Wasteland players find it at a crashed UFO site, while non-Wild Wasteland players encounter mercenaries with the YCS Wendy 6, a unique energy weapon. Both are powerful, but they're mutually exclusive, meaning players have to choose between comedy and a different gameplay reward. The Wild Wasteland debate reflects a larger tension in game design. How much should games respect their own fiction versus embracing meta-humor and player entertainment? New Vegas's solution, make it optional and transparent, was elegant, but it still divides the fan base between purists who see Wild Wasteland as canon-breaking and those who view it as essential to Fallout's identity. The Gunrunner's Arsenal DLC design. Gunrunner's Arsenal is often dismissed as a simple weapon pack, but its design philosophy reveals interesting insights into Obsidian's approach to DLC. Unlike the story-focused expansions, Dead Money, Honest Hearts, Old World Blues, Lonesome Road, GRA was conceived as a purely mechanical addition. New weapons, weapon mods, ammo types, and challenges for players who wanted more combat variety without additional narrative content. Josh Sawyer personally oversaw many of the weapon additions, ensuring they filled specific gameplay niches or addressed balance issues in the base game. For example, GRA added more mid-tier weapons to smooth out the progression curve and introduced special ammo types that gave players more tactical options in combat. The DLC also added challenges: kill X enemies with Y weapon type, that rewarded players for experimenting with different playstyles rather than sticking to the same optimized loadout. The pricing strategy was controversial. GRA was cheaper than the story DLCs but still required payment for what amounted to gear most other games would include in free updates. However, Sawyer defended the DLC as optional content for players who wanted more depth without forcing everyone to pay for features they might not use. GRA's existence also reflects the realities of post-launch development. Obsidian had finished the main game and DLC narrative content, but they still had designers and programmers available who could create gameplay systems. Rather than leave that talent idle, they produced GRA, giving hardcore fans more tools while generating additional revenue to fund future projects. Courier Stash Pre-Order Controversy. The Courier Stash bundle, which includes the Caravan Pack, Classic Pack, Mercenary Pack, and Tribal Pack DLCs, started as pre-order bonuses tied to different retailers. If you pre-ordered from GameStop, you got one pack. Amazon customers got another. Best Buy offered a third. This fragmentation frustrated fans who wanted all the gear but couldn't pre-order from multiple stores. Obsidian and Bethesda eventually bundled all 4 packs into the Courier Stash DLC, allowing players to buy everything in one package post-launch. However, this solution created a new problem. Players who pre-ordered from one retailer and paid full price for the game felt cheated when others could buy all the bonuses later for a small additional fee. The controversy highlighted the downsides of retailer-exclusive pre-order bonuses, a practice that was common in the early 2010s but has since fallen out of favor due to consumer backlash. From a gameplay perspective, the Courier Stash items are controversial because they give players powerful gear right at the start, potentially trivializing early game challenges. The Mercenary Pack's grenade rifle and sturdy Caravan shotgun are significantly better than anything you'd normally find in Goodsprings or Prim, and the extra supplies from the other packs remove much of the resource scarcity that makes hardcore mode challenging. Many veteran players recommend new players avoid using Courier Stash items on their first playthrough to preserve the intended difficulty, curve, and sense of progression. Dead Money's divisive design philosophy. Dead Money is the most divisive DLC in Fallout New Vegas' Season Pass, with fans either loving its survival, horror atmosphere, and thematic depth, or hating its punishing mechanics and restricted gameplay. Lead designer Chris Avallone intentionally designed Dead Money to strip away the power fantasy that defines most Fallout gameplay. Your gear is confiscated, your companion options are limited, and the environment itself is hostile through the cloud poison gas, radios that detonate your collar, and ghost people enemies that regenerate unless dismembered. Avallone wanted players to feel trapped and desperate, mirroring protagonist's situation as prisoners of Father Elijah forced to rob the Sierra Madre casino. The DLC's themes of letting go, greed, and obsession are reinforced mechanically. You can fill your pockets with gold bars from the vault, but they're so heavy you'll barely be able to escape, forcing a choice between wealth and survival. Players who embrace Dead Money's survival horror mechanics and appreciate its noir-influenced story consider it a masterpiece of atmosphere and consequence-driven design. Players who prefer New Vegas' open-world freedom and power progression hate being constrained by collars, limited resources, and companions they can't dismiss. The polarized reception reveals a fundamental truth about game design. Restricting player freedom can create meaningful, thematic experiences, but it risks alienating players who value agency above all else. Dead Money's legacy is complex. It's either Obsidian's boldest DLC or their most frustrating depending entirely on what you value in a Fallout experience. The Sierra Madre Gold Bar Escape Trick. One of Dead Money's most satisfying moments for clever players is discovering how to escape the Sierra Madre vault with all 37 gold bars, despite Father Elijah's security systems and the weight limit designed to prevent it. Each gold bar weighs 35 pounds and is worth 10,000 caps, meaning all 37 bars represent nearly 400,000 caps and 1,000 pounds of encumbrance, far beyond what any character can carry even with maximum strength. The intended design forces players to leave the gold behind, reinforcing the DLC's theme of letting go of greed. However, multiple exploits exist. The most famous involves using stealth boys and precise timing to sneak past Elijah, grab all the gold bars, then use the elevator before he traps you. Another method involves exploiting companion inventory to have Dean, Dog, or Christine carry some bars before the final confrontation. Yet another trick uses the drop items and pick them up during load screens exploit to bypass weight restrictions. These exploits became legendary in the New Vegas community, with players sharing strategies and speedrunners optimizing the gold bar heist to save time. Josh. Sawyer has acknowledged awareness of the exploits, but chose not to patch them, respecting player ingenuity and the satisfaction of beating Dead Money's thematic lesson through sheer determination and technical know-how. The Gold Bar Escape represents New Vegas at its best, a game that presents challenges and themes but ultimately trusts players to define their own success, even if that means breaking the intended experience. Dean Domino's Hidden Hostility Trigger. Dean Domino, the pre-war ghoul entertainer in Dead Money, has one of the most punishing hidden reputation systems in Fallout New Vegas. If you ever show him up or wound his pride during dialogue, even unintentionally, he becomes permanently hostile later in the DLC, forcing you to kill him. The triggers are subtle and easy to miss, passing certain skill checks that make you look smarter or more talented than Dean can set him off. For example, if you pass a barter check during your first conversation pointing out that you recognize his manipulation tactics, Dean takes it as a personal insult and secretly vows to betray you. Players trying to role-play intelligent or perceptive characters often trigger this hostility without realizing it, then are shocked when Dean attacks during the heist. Chris Avallone designed Dean this way intentionally. He's a narcissist who can't tolerate being upstaged, and his ego is so fragile that even small slights become unforgivable. The system reinforces Dead Money's themes about toxic personalities and the dangers of surrounding yourself with damaged people. But it's also frustrating for players who don't realize they've locked themselves out of a peaceful resolution. The Dean hostility mechanic is peak Obsidian design, thematically brilliant and character appropriate, but potentially punishing if you're not paying close attention to dialogue subtext. It rewards players who understand psychology and social dynamics, while punishing those who treat dialogue as a series of skill checks to pass rather than actual conversations with consequences. Christine's identity as Veronica's lover, Christine Royce, the mute scribe you rescue in Dead Money, is revealed through scattered dialogue and subtext to be the former lover of Veronica Santangelo, one of the base game's companions. Their relationship ended when the Brotherhood of Steel's rigid hierarchy and Christine's assignment to hunt down Father Elijah separated them. Christine's entire presence in the Sierra Madre, her mutilation by the auto dock, her obsessive hunt for Elijah, stems from her desire to protect Veronica and eliminate the threat Elijah poses to the Brotherhood. The connection between Christine and Veronica is never explicitly stated in dialogue, requiring players to piece together clues from both Dead Money and Veronica's companion quest. Once you realize the connection, both characters' stories take on deeper meaning. Veronica's longing for someone who understands her, her desire for a dress and a normal life, and her eventual heartbreak make more sense knowing Christine is out there somewhere, probably dead or worse. Christine's desperate pursuit of Elijah across the wasteland, even after being captured and tortured, reflects her devotion to Veronica and her guilt over leaving. The reunion players want, bringing Christine back to Veronica, never happens, which is tragically appropriate for Dead Money's themes about loss, obsession, and the impossibility of reclaiming the past. The Christine-Veronica connection is one of New Vegas's most understated storytelling achievements, a queer love story told through implication and environmental details rather than explicit exposition. Dog, God's psychological horror. Dog, God, the mutated Nightkin super mutant in Dead Money, represents one of the most disturbing explorations of dissociative identity disorder in gaming. His personality is fractured into two distinct identities: Dog, a childlike, loyal persona who follows orders and seeks approval, and God, a violent, misanthropic persona who views humans as inferior and wants to dominate. The split was caused by Father Elijah's psychological conditioning, combined with the schizophrenia that plagues all Nightkin due to Stealth Boy overuse. Throughout Dead Money, you can influence which personality is dominant through dialogue choices, and your decisions determine Dog, God's fate. You can help them integrate into a balanced personality. Allow Dog to dominate, resulting in a subservient slave. Allow God to dominate, creating a violent predator. Or kill them. The integration path is the most satisfying but also the most difficult, requiring high speech and careful dialogue choices that validate both personalities' concerns. Chris Avallone's writing treats Dog, God's condition, with surprising seriousness, avoiding cheap, crazy person stereotypes while acknowledging the horror of having your sense of self fractured by external manipulation. The character also serves as a thematic mirror to the DLC's central conflict. Everyone in Dead Money is fragmented and struggling to become whole again, whether that's Dean trying to reclaim his pre-war glory, Christine recovering from trauma, or the Courier reconciling their past as Ulysses' delivery person who destroyed the Divide. Honest Heart's troubled development. Honest Hearts, the DLC set in Zion National Park, had one of the roughest development cycles of New Vegas's expansions. Originally, the DLC was supposed to feature a much larger role for Ulysses, who would serve as one of the companions and provide insight into his philosophy and history. However, late in development, Obsidian realized Ulysses' story was too complex and important to squeeze into a side DLC. He deserved his own expansion where he could be the central focus. This decision meant scrapping much of the written dialogue and quest content, then hastily creating a replacement character, Follows Chalk, the naive new Canaanite scout who teaches you about Zion. The last-minute rewrite shows in places Follows Chalk feels less developed than other companions, and some of Honest Heart's pacing issues stem from restructuring the narrative after removing its original deuteragonist. Josh Sawyer later acknowledged that Honest Hearts is probably the weakest DLC from a narrative standpoint, though he's proud of the environmental design and the survivalist story. The decision to save Ulysses for Lonesome Road was correct. He's far more effective as a lone antagonist with an entire DLC focused on his conflict with the Courier. But it left Honest Heart scrambling to fill the gap. Despite its troubled development, the DLC has its defenders, players who love exploring Zion's natural beauty, those who appreciate Joshua Graham's character, and fans who consider the survivalist terminal entries some of the best environmental storytelling in any Fallout game. Joshua Graham's instant icon status, Joshua. Graham, the Burned Man, became one of Fallout's most iconic characters despite appearing in only one DLC. His entrance is perfectly staged. After hearing whispered legends about him throughout the base game, you finally meet him in Zion, calmly wrapping his burned body in fresh bandages while reciting scripture and cleaning guns. Voice actor Keith Sarabika delivers Graham's lines with a gravelly intensity that sells both his religious conviction and barely suppressed violence. Graham's backstory, Caesar's legate who was set on fire and thrown into the Grand Canyon, only to survive and find redemption through faith, is the stuff of wasteland legend, and his presence in Honest Hearts grounds the DLC's themes about forgiveness, revenge, and whether people can truly change. The central choice in Honest Hearts revolves around Graham. Do you support his plan to wipe out the White Legs in righteous fury? Or do you follow Daniel's pacifist approach and evacuate the new Canaanites? Graham's character tests your own beliefs about justice and mercy, and his dialogue reacts to your choice with genuine philosophical weight. His popularity spawned countless memes, particularly his line, "I survived because the fire inside burned brighter than the fire around me," which became a motivational mantra for fans. Graham's design is also memorable. The bandage-wrapped silhouette, the .45 pistols, the quiet menace, making him instantly recognizable even to people who haven't played Honest Hearts. He's proof that a character doesn't need extensive screen time to leave a lasting impact. They just need a strong concept, excellent writing, and a memorable voice performance. The Survivalist complete arc, Randall Clark, the Survivalist, tells one of the most emotionally devastating stories in Fallout without ever speaking a word. His tale is conveyed entirely through scattered terminal entries hidden in caves and campsites across Zion Canyon, which players can choose to seek out or ignore entirely. Clark was a soldier on vacation in Zion when the bombs fell in 2077. He survived the initial blast but watched radiation and disease kill his girlfriend and everyone else he cared about. Over the following decades, he became a hermit, living in the canyon and struggling with PTSD, loneliness, and suicidal ideation. He nearly killed himself multiple times but was repeatedly pulled back by the arrival of new groups. First, the Vault 22 survivors, whom he watched die slowly from the plant spores that infected them, then Mexican refugees who were massacred by Vault dwellers, then finally the children of those refugees, the tribe that would become the Sorrows. Clark became their secret guardian, leaving supplies and eliminating threats without ever revealing himself. He wanted the children to grow up free from the old world's violence, so he remained a ghost, the father in the caves who protected them from a distance. His final entries, written as "He's dying of old age and sickness," are heartbreaking. He hopes the tribes will remember him as a myth, a guardian spirit rather than a broken old man. The Survivalist's rifle, a unique weapon found near his skeleton, is one of Honest Heart's best rewards, but the true treasure is his story, a meditation on purpose, legacy, and the human need to protect others even when hope seems lost. Old World Blues shift to comedy. Old World Blues started development as a darker, more serious DLC exploring pre-war scientific atrocities. But somewhere along the way it transformed into a comedy about insane scientists obsessed with penises and teddy bears. Chris Avallone has discussed this tonal shift in interviews, explaining that as the writing team developed the think tank characters, they realized the absurdity of brains in jars arguing about anatomy could be played for dark humor. The decision to lean into comedy was risky. Old World Blues takes place immediately after the grim, claustrophobic dead money, and the tonal whiplash is extreme. However, the comedy works because it's rooted in character. The think tank scientists are genuinely insane, their obsessions and petty arguments stemming from centuries of isolation and cognitive deterioration. The humor also provides relief after dead money's intensity, giving players a chance to laugh at the wasteland's absurdity rather than just surviving its horrors. Beneath the jokes, Old World Blues still explores serious themes: the ethics of human experimentation, the dangers of unchecked scientific advancement, and the dehumanization that comes from viewing people as research subjects. But it wraps those themes in B-movie sci-fi aesthetics and dick jokes. The DLC's tonal balance is precarious. Too much comedy and it becomes forgettable fluff. Too serious and it feels like a retread of Dead Money's bleakness. Old World Blues navigates this line successfully by trusting players to appreciate both the humor and the horror, understanding that sometimes the best way to examine darkness is through the lens of absurdist comedy. The sink as player housing. The sink in Old World Blues became New Vegas's most popular player housing, surpassing the Lucky 38 suite and other base game options. What makes the sink special is its functionality. The various appliances aren't just decorative, they provide unique services that make the location genuinely useful. The biological research station breaks down organs and other body parts into useful items. The book chute converts books into skill magazines. The Sync Central Intelligence manages everything and provides fast travel. The personality modules, toaster, muggy, light switch, etc., add flavor and companionship, making the sink feel lived in rather than just a storage space. Obsidian understood that player housing needs to serve mechanical purposes beyond aesthetics. It should streamline inventory management, provide crafting access, and save time. The sink delivers on all these fronts while also being thematically rich. You're literally living inside a pre-war research facility, surrounded by the same technology that created the think tank's horrors. The location also remains accessible from the Mojave after completing Old World Blues, meaning players can fast travel to the Big MT whenever they need the sink services. This permanent access transformed the sink from a DLC location into a core part of many players' New Vegas experience, proof that good player housing design is about utility and atmosphere working in harmony. The Sonic Emitter's weapon mod system. Old World Blues introduced the Sonic Emitter, a unique energy weapon that uses different sonic frequencies, weapon mods, to change its damage type and special effects. The Tarantula mod does bonus damage to robots, the Opera Singer causes targets to explode, and the Gabriel's Bark knocks down enemies with sonic force. This mod system showcased a more creative approach to weapon customization than the base game's mostly stat-focused modifications. The Sonic Emitter is also tied to Old World Blues' story, its big MT technology that you assemble from scattered components, and each frequency module you find represents a different failed experiment. The weapon's versatility makes it viable for multiple playstyles. You can swap mods mid-combat to adapt to different enemy types, or specialize in one frequency for maximum effectiveness. The Opera Singer mod became particularly popular for its spectacular enemy explosion effect, turning the Sonic Emitter into one of the most satisfying weapons in the game despite its modest damage numbers. The weapon also exemplifies Old World Blues design philosophy. Take pre-war super science, make it both functional and absurd, and let players experiment with tools the think tank created for incomprehensible purposes. The Sonic Emitter isn't the strongest weapon in New Vegas, but it's one of the most interesting, rewarding, creative play, and environmental storytelling in equal measure. The Transportal Ponder's unique functionality. The Transportal Ponder, the device that lets you fast travel to and from the Big MT after completing Old World Blues, is one of the few quest items in New Vegas that remains usable post-completion. Most quest items get removed from your inventory or become useless decorations, but the Transportal Ponder serves as a permanent link between the Mojave and the Big MT. This design choice has significant implications. It means Old World Blues locations and resources remain accessible throughout the game, effectively expanding New Vegas's map permanently. Players can return to harvest plants, loot respawning containers, and use the sink's crafting stations whenever they need them. Transportal Ponder also appears in Lonesome Road. Eddie recognizes it and comments on your adventures in the Big MT, showing that the DLCs were designed to acknowledge each other rather than existing in isolation. From a lore perspective, the Transportal Ponder raises interesting questions about why you're the only person who can use Big MT technology to fast travel. The answer lies in your unique biology. The think tank modified your body with technology that interfaces with the Transportal Ponder, marking you as one of Big MT's creations, even after you escape. This detail reinforces Old World Blues body horror themes. You're permanently changed by your time in the Big MT, carrying its technology inside you for the rest of the game. The X-13 Research Facility Stealth Suit. The X-13 Research Facility in Old World Blues contains the stealth suit MK118, but obtaining it requires completing a unique stealth test that's completely different from normal New Vegas gameplay. The facility's AI puts you through a series of time challenges where you must sneak past holographic enemies without being detected, retrieve test objects, and escape without raising alarms. The challenges are genuinely difficult because they remove your normal combat options. You can't just shoot your way through or tank damage like in the rest of the game. This forced stealth gameplay divided players. Some appreciated the change of pace and the challenge of pure stealth, while others found it frustrating and antithetical to New Vegas's usual flexibility. The Stealth Suit Make 2 reward is worth it for stealth builds, offering great defensive stats, a built-in Stealth Boy effect, and the unique personality AI that constantly talks to you. However, non-stealth characters might struggle with the tests or find the suit's benefits not worth the effort. The X-13 challenges represent Obsidian experimenting with more structured, objective-based gameplay within New Vegas's open framework. It's a small taste of what a more linear, stealth-focused Fallout game might feel like, and whether that's appealing or tedious depends entirely on your preferred playstyle. Elijah's return in Dead Money Father. Elijah's appearance in Dead Money as the primary antagonist was a deliberate callback to Fallout New Vegas's base game, where he's mentioned frequently in Brotherhood of Steel dialogue and terminal entries. He was the previous elder of the Mojave Brotherhood chapter, before abandoning them to pursue his obsession with pre-war technology. Veronica Santangelo, his former student, carries guilt about not being able to bring him back, and her companion quest revolves partly around Elijah's legacy. By making Elijah the villain of Dead Money, Obsidian rewarded players who paid attention to Brotherhood lore while also creating a satisfying character arc for Veronica players who brought her along to the Sierra Madre. The DLC reveals that Elijah has become completely unhinged, viewing people as tools and willing to commit genocide if it means securing pre-war weapons. His plan to use the Sierra Madre's cloud as a weapon of mass destruction represents the ultimate corruption of the Brotherhood's technology hoarding philosophy. Instead of protecting people from dangerous technology, Elijah wants to use it for conquest. The final confrontation with Elijah offers multiple solutions. You can kill him, trap him in the vault with the gold bars, or convince him to let you go depending on your skills and previous choices. His presence in Dead Money elevated the DLC from a standalone story to an integral part of New Vegas's larger narrative about how obsession and ideology can corrupt even well-intentioned people. The Cloud's scientific justification. The Cloud, the poisonous red mist that fills the Sierra Madre and serves as Dead Money's primary environmental hazard, is rooted in actual pre-war science rather than just being a vague, toxic gas. According to terminal entries in the DLC, the Cloud was developed by Big MT scientists as a potential chemical weapon, a self-sustaining, self-replicating airborne compound that could deny territory to enemies indefinitely. The Sierra Madre's industrial sector was testing and refining the Cloud when the bombs fell, and the compound has been slowly spreading ever since, kept partially contained by the casino's pre-war security systems. The Cloud's most horrifying aspect is its interaction with the hazmat suits. When people died wearing protective gear in the Cloud, the suit's medical systems kept their bodies alive through constant chemical injection, creating the ghost people, undead horrors that regenerate unless dismembered. This scientific explanation grounds Dead Money's horror in Fallout's retro-futuristic science, where chemical and biological weapons development paralleled real Cold War programs, but with atomic age super science taken to absurd extremes. The Cloud also serves as a narrative metaphor for toxic relationships and environments that slowly poison everything they touch, fitting for a DLC about characters trapped by their own obsessions and Father Elijah's manipulative control. The Sierra Madre vending machine revolution. The Sierra Madre vending machines, which allow players to craft almost anything using Sierra Madre chips as currency, represent one of Dead Money's most significant permanent rewards. After completing the DLC, you can take chips back to the Mojave and continue using any Sierra Madre vending machines you find to craft ammunition, stim packs, weapon repair kits, and other supplies effectively for free. Since chips are weightless and plentiful in Dead Money, savvy players can stockpile thousands before leaving. This breaks the Mojave's economy and resource management, giving players infinite crafting materials for the rest of the game. Josh Sawyer has acknowledged this imbalance but defended it as a legitimate reward for completing one of the game's most challenging DLCs. The vending machines also reinforce Dead Money's themes about consumer culture and the promise of endless abundance. The Sierra Madre was marketed as a place where every desire could be fulfilled, and in a twisted way, that promise comes true through the vending machine's near miraculous crafting abilities. Players who escape Dead Money with maximum chips effectively achieve the fortune the casino was always promising, just not in the form they expected. The vending machine reward system is classic Obsidian design. Give players powerful tools that could break game balance, but trust them to use these tools responsibly or embrace the power fantasy if they choose. Vera Key's tragic backstory. Vera Keys, the starlet whose hologram greets visitors to the Sierra Madre, has one of Dead Money's most heartbreaking backstories despite being dead before the DLC begins. Scattered audio logs and terminal entries reveal that Vera was trapped in an abusive relationship with Dean Domino, who controlled her career and manipulated her emotionally. She became addicted to MedX, the Fallout universe's opiate, to cope with the stress, and Dean used her addiction to maintain control. Vera desperately wanted to escape both Dean and her gilded cage of fame, but she was too afraid and dependent to break free. Her obsession with Frederick Sinclair, the Sierra Madre's owner, was partly genuine affection but also a desperate grab for a new protector to replace Dean. Sinclair truly loved Vera and tried to save her, but his romantic gestures, building security system to keep her safe, creating a private villa for their escape, became another cage. Vera died in the Sierra Madres villa, still trapped, her body never recovered. Her story mirrors Dead Money's central theme about letting go. Vera couldn't let go of Dean. Sinclair couldn't let go of Vera. Dean couldn't let go of his wounded pride. And Elijah can't let go of his obsession with pre-war technology. Every character in Dead Money is destroyed by their inability to release what's killing them, and Vera's fate is the DLC's emotional anchor, the tragedy that set everything else in motion. Honest Hearts canceled companion content beyond losing Ulysses. Honest Hearts originally planned more extensive companion interactions and quest lines for Joshua Graham, Follows Chalk, and Waking Cloud. Cut content includes longer personal quests for each character, exploring their beliefs and backgrounds in more depth. Joshua Graham was supposed to have additional dialogue about his time as Caesar's legate, including specific battles and atrocities he committed, giving players a fuller picture of who he was before his transformation. Follows Chalk's content would have explored his desire to see the outside world and what that curiosity meant for the Dead Horses tribe's isolationist culture. Waking Cloud's storyline would have dealt more extensively with her grief over her husband's death and her faith in the new Canaanites' teachings. Time constraints forced these storylines to be condensed or cut entirely, leaving Honest Hearts companions feeling less developed than the base game's followers or even Dead Money's forced companions. The cuts are particularly noticeable if you bring a base game companion into Honest Hearts. Characters like Boone, Veronica, or Cass have almost no unique dialogue in Zion, missing opportunities for interesting interactions with Graham or commentary on tribal culture. Despite these limitations, Joshua Graham remains compelling largely due to Keith Sarabaka's powerful voice performance and the character's inherently dramatic backstory, proving that sometimes a strong core concept can overcome limited content. Zion's environmental beauty versus gameplay. Zion National Park in Honest Hearts is visually stunning, with red rock formations, flowing rivers, and lush vegetation that make it one of the most beautiful locations in any Fallout game. However, this environmental beauty created gameplay challenges. The vertical terrain and winding paths made navigation confusing, and the dense foliage obscured enemies, leading to frustrating ambushes. Some players complained that Zion felt like a hiking simulator rather than an engaging combat zone, with too much time spent following Follows Chalk through winding canyons without significant encounters or discoveries. The map design also made side content easy to miss. Caves, campsites, and survivalist caches are scattered throughout Zion, but without clear markers, players could complete the main quest without finding half the DLC's best content. This tension between environmental authenticity and gameplay clarity reflects a common open-world design challenge. How do you create realistic, immersive spaces without sacrificing player convenience and pacing? Honest Hearts leaned heavily toward environmental authenticity, prioritizing Zion's natural beauty and using real-world geography as a template. The result is a DLC that's visually impressive and thematically appropriate, showing that beauty still exists in the post-apocalypse, but potentially less engaging from a pure gameplay perspective than the more densely packed Dead Money or Old World Blues environments. Players who enjoy exploration and environmental storytelling love Zion. Players who prefer constant action and clear objectives find it meandering. The tribal design philosophy, Honest Heart's tribal factions, the Sorrows, Dead Horses, and White Legs, were designed to show how post-apocalyptic societies develop their own cultures and mythologies over generations. The Sorrows are peaceful and naive, protected by Zion's isolation and Joshua Graham's secret guardianship. The Dead Horses are pragmatic warriors who've learned to defend their territory without losing their humanity. The White Legs are cargo cult raiders, imitating symbols they don't understand and serving powers that will discard them. This spectrum of tribal development reflects real-world anthropology and colonialism, what happens when isolated groups encounter outside forces with superior technology and organization. The New Canaanites. Missionary work with the tribes raises ethical questions the DLC doesn't fully answer. Is Daniel right to teach the tribes his faith and values, or is he imposing cultural imperialism on vulnerable people? Is Joshua Graham's protective militarism necessary for survival, or does it rob the tribes of agency and moral development? These questions don't have easy answers, and Honest Hearts trusts players to grapple with them rather than providing a clear right choice. The tribal design also connects to broader Fallout themes about how civilizations rebuild after collapse. The NCR and Caesar's Legion are just larger scale versions of what the Sorrows and White Legs might become, given time and resources, suggesting that the patterns of conflict, expansion, and cultural clash repeat across all scales. Daniel's pacifist stance and Mormon theology, and the New Canaanite missionary in Honest Hearts, represents a pacifist Christian response to violence and oppression, directly contrasting Joshua Graham's righteous fury approach. Daniel believes the Sorrows should evacuate Zion rather than fight the White Legs, preserving life at the cost of their homeland. This stance reflects Mormon theology about peace and the sanctity of life, but it also raises practical questions. Is pacifism viable in the wasteland, where violent factions like Caesar's Legion actively seek to conquer and enslave peaceful communities? Daniel's position becomes even more complicated when you learn that he's partly motivated by fear. He's afraid that if the Sorrows learn violence, they'll lose their innocence and become corrupted, like Joshua Graham. This paternalistic protectiveness, while well-intentioned, denies the tribe's agency and treats them as children who can't be trusted with moral complexity. The choice between Daniel's evacuation plan and Graham's extermination campaign is Honest Heart's moral core, and neither option is clearly right. Evacuation saves lives but abandons the tribe's home and leaves the White Legs to join the Legion. Extermination protects Zion but turns the Sorrows into killers and validates Graham's violent worldview. Daniel's character works because he's genuinely virtuous. His pacifism comes from sincere faith and compassion, but the wasteland constantly tests whether virtue can survive without compromise, a question New Vegas explores throughout the base game and all its DLCs. Lonesome Road's delayed release. Lonesome Road was originally planned as the third DLC, but was pushed back to become the fourth and final expansion, allowing Obsidian to build Ulysses' character arc across multiple DLCs. References to Ulysses appear in Honest Hearts as the White Legs' former teacher, and Old World Blues terminal entries mention his passage through Big MT, creating anticipation for his eventual appearance. This sequential storytelling was intentional. Josh Sawyer and Chris Avallone wanted Lonesome Road to feel like the culmination of the Courier's journey, answering questions that had been raised throughout the base game and previous DLCs. The delayed release also gave Obsidian more time to develop the Divide's visual design and narrative density, making it one of the most atmospheric and thematically cohesive DLCs. However, the delay meant players had to wait months to get answers about Ulysses and the Courier's past, building expectations that the final DLC had to meet. For some players, Lonesome Road delivered on those expectations, providing a dramatic confrontation and meaningful choices about the Mojave's future. For others, Ulysses's philosophy felt overwrought, and the wait made the payoff feel less satisfying than hoped. The release strategy shows Obsidian treating the DLC Season Pass as a cohesive narrative arc rather than four disconnected adventures, an approach that was relatively novel for DLC at the time and influenced how later studios structured post-launch content. The Divide's visual design inspirations. The Divide in Lonesome Road draws visual inspiration from multiple sources, creating one of Fallout's most striking and apocalyptic environments. The shattered highways, buildings split in half, and debris suspended by wind currents reference real tornado and hurricane damage, but taken to supernatural extremes. The constant sandstorms and radiation storms create an atmosphere of relentless hostility, making the Divide feel like nature itself has turned against human presence. Art director Joe Sanabria specifically wanted the Divide to look like the apocalypse of the apocalypse, a place so thoroughly destroyed that it makes the rest of the Mojave look almost habitable by comparison. The twisted American flags, half-buried military vehicles, and pre-war infrastructure torn apart and scattered represent the physical manifestation of Ulysses's philosophy about symbols and nations dying. The red-tinted lighting and omnipresent dust give everything a hellish quality, appropriate for a location that's essentially the Courier's personal purgatory. The environmental design also serves gameplay purposes. The vertical terrain and narrow passages create choke points for combat, while the open areas expose players to marked men snipers and deathclaw ambushes. Every visual element in the Divide reinforces the same message. This place is dead, irredeemable, and exists only as a monument to failure and the consequences of careless action. The commissary terminal's tragic stories. Throughout Lonesome Road, commissary terminals scattered in abandoned military outposts contain orders for supplies and personal messages that tell the story of the Divide's final days. These terminal entries reveal that the Divide was a thriving community built around a crucial supply route between NCR and Legion territory. Soldiers from both factions were stationed there, and despite their nations being at war, many had developed working relationships and even friendships. Civilian contractors, merchants, and settlers had established homes and businesses, believing the Divide's strategic importance would protect them. The terminal messages show increasing tension as the nuclear detonation approached, supply deliveries becoming erratic, personnel expressing confusion about strange seismic activity, and finally desperate last messages as the missiles launched and the world came apart. These environmental stories make the Divide's destruction feel personal and tragic rather than abstract. The commissary system itself, automated terminals still taking orders decades after everyone died, becomes a haunting reminder of bureaucracy outlasting the people it was meant to serve. Players who take the time to read these terminals get a fuller picture of what the Courier unknowingly destroyed, adding weight to Ulysses's accusations and making the final confrontation hit harder emotionally. The marked men's equipment tells their stories. The marked men in Lonesome Road can be identified as former NCR or Legion soldiers based on their equipment and behavior. Some marked men wear remnants of NCR Ranger armor or carry service rifles, while others have Legion gear and use machetes or throwing spears. This attention to detail reinforces that these creatures were once individual soldiers with distinct allegiances, now reduced to mindless violence but still clinging to the tools and tactics of their former lives. The equipment variation also provides gameplay benefits. Players can identify which marked men are likely to use ranged versus melee attacks based on their gear, allowing for tactical preparation. More disturbingly, some marked men carry personal items, holotapes, letters, photos, that humanize them even as they're trying to kill you. Reading a dead marked man's letter home to family, then realizing the author is now a shambling corpse attacking you in the next room, creates powerful cognitive dissonance. The environmental storytelling through equipment shows Obsidian's commitment to making even generic enemies feel like they have history and identity. The marked men aren't just combat obstacles, they're walking graves, and every encounter is a reminder of the human cost of the courier's delivery. The Silo Bunker's nuclear puzzle. Lonesome Road's nuclear silos are protected by a series of code-breaking puzzles that require players to find launch codes scattered throughout the divide. The codes are hidden in commissary terminals, written on walls, and referenced in audio logs, forcing players to explore thoroughly if they want access to the ending's nuclear option. This design choice makes the nuclear launch feel earned rather than arbitrary. You have to actively work to gain the ability to destroy the NCR or Legion, and the effort involved gives players time to consider whether they really want to follow through. The silos themselves are visually impressive, with massive ICBMs still operational after 200 years, a testament to pre-war engineering and the terrifying longevity of nuclear weapons. The fact that these missiles remain functional is itself a plot point. Ulysses kept them maintained as tools for his eventual confrontation with the Courier, planning to force them to choose whether to repeat history by launching more nukes or break the cycle by standing down. The silo puzzles also reward players who pay attention to environmental storytelling. Codes and hints are integrated naturally into the world rather than handed out in obvious quest markers, making exploration feel like detective work rather than checkbox completion. Ulysses offered a turn back throughout Lonesome Road. Ulysses gives the Courier multiple opportunities to turn back and abandon the journey into the divide. These moments, delivered through radio transmissions and iBot messages, serve as both narrative warnings and genuine player choice checkpoints. Ulysses isn't lying when he says the road ahead is dangerous, and the truce at the end might be unwelcome. He genuinely believes the Courier might prefer ignorance over confronting their role in the divide's destruction. This offer to retreat is unusual in video game storytelling, where most antagonists taunt or threaten rather than giving earnest warnings. It reveals Ulysses' complex mindset. He wants confrontation and accountability, but he also respects the Courier's agency and recognizes that not everyone wants or needs the philosophical reckoning he's offering. Players who ignore these warnings and push forward are making an active choice to engage with Lonesome Road's themes rather than being railroaded into the confrontation. The option to turn back also serves as a pressure release valve for players who aren't ready for endgame content or who want to complete other objectives before tackling the DLC's challenges. It's a small detail, but it reinforces New Vegas's overall design philosophy. Respect player choice even when that choice is to walk away from content the developers spent months creating. The final confrontation's speech options. The final confrontation with Ulysses offers one of New Vegas's most extensive dialogue trees, with numerous skill checks, faction-specific responses, and philosophical arguments that can convince him to stand down without violence. Players with high speech can appeal to Ulysses' sense of purpose and redirect his anger toward more productive ends. Characters who've sided strongly with the NCR or Legion can argue from those ideological positions, either convincing Ulysses that these factions deserve a chance or that his nihilism is justified. Players who collected all of Eddie's audio logs unlock special dialogue options referencing the iBot's story and drawing parallels to Ulysses' own journey. The skill and reputation checks are genuinely difficult, requiring investment in dialogue-focused stats that many combat-oriented characters might lack. This creates a satisfying role-playing challenge. Pure fighters might have no choice but to battle Ulysses, while diplomats can talk their way to peace. The conversation also allows players to express their character's philosophy about guilt, responsibility, and whether individuals can be blamed for systemic failures. Ulysses responds dynamically to these arguments, sometimes conceding points while maintaining his core beliefs, creating one of New Vegas's most sophisticated character interactions. The fact that you can completely avoid fighting Ulysses through dialogue alone demonstrates Obsidian's commitment to non-violent solutions, even in a DLC heavily focused on combat and destruction. The Riot Gear's symbolic weight. The Riot Gear armor sets found in Lonesome Road, Standard Riot Gear, Elite Riot Gear, and the unique Advanced Riot Gear are among the best light armor options in New Vegas, but they also carry symbolic weight. These armors were worn by NCR Rangers and first responders who tried to maintain order as the Divide collapsed, and finding them on corpses scattered throughout the DLC tells a story of failed heroism and last stands. The Elite Riot Gear, particularly the version with the distinctive gas mask and trench coat, became iconic among fans for its striking visual design and post-apocalyptic aesthetic. The armor's practical benefits, high damage threshold, low weight, no penalties to movement or agility, make it ideal for stealth and sniper builds, the playstyle most associated with NCR Rangers. Wearing riot gear in the Divide feels thematically appropriate, like the Courier is taking up the mantle of those who fell, trying to protect the region. The armor also appears in promotional materials and fan art more than almost any other New Vegas equipment, proving that strong visual design can make items memorable beyond their mechanical benefits. The riot gear represents the intersection of function and symbolism that New Vegas does so well. It's genuinely useful equipment that also tells a story about sacrifice, duty, and the futility of trying to hold back apocalypse through force of will alone. The Red Glare's unique missile launcher. Red Glare, the unique missile launcher found in Lonesome Road, is one of the most powerful explosive weapons in Fallout New Vegas. It fires 3 missiles simultaneously in a spread pattern, dealing devastating area damage at the cost of consuming ammunition at an alarming rate. The weapon's name references the rocket's red glare from the U.S. national anthem, fitting Lonesome Road's themes about American symbolism and national identity. Red glare is particularly effective against the marked men and death claws that populate the Divide, allowing players to clear groups of tough enemies quickly. However, its ammunition consumption makes it impractical for regular use. Most players reserve it for particularly difficult encounters or boss fights. The weapon represents the Divide's military history. Before the destruction, this was a heavily armed supply route with access to cutting-edge military hardware, and weapons like Red Glare are remnants of that martial presence. Finding Red Glare requires thorough exploration and often combat with high-level enemies, making it a reward for players who engage fully with Lonesome Road's challenges. The weapon also exemplifies New Vegas's approach to unique items. They're not just statistically better versions of standard equipment. They're distinctive tools with specific use cases that encourage players to adapt their tactics and resource management. The shoulder mount machine gun Lonesome Road introduces shoulder mount machine guns as environmental hazards and enemy weapons, representing automated defense systems that survive the Divide's destruction. These weapons track and fire on anything that moves, creating dangerous choke points and forcing players to approach areas carefully or risk getting shredded. The shoulder-mounted guns can be disabled through stealth, destroyed from range, or hacked with high science skill, giving players multiple approaches to overcoming these obstacles. They're also visually striking. Seeing these autonomous weapons still functioning centuries after their operators died reinforces the theme of war machinery outlasting the soldiers who deployed it. Some marked men use portable versions of these weapons, making them especially dangerous enemies. The shoulder-mounted machine gun encounters add variety to Lonesome Road's combat, breaking up the standard fights with marked men and death claws. They also serve as environmental storytelling. These were defensive emplacements meant to protect the Divide's infrastructure, but with everyone dead, they now protect nothing but ruins, firing blindly at targets that no longer matter. It's a small detail, but it contributes to the DLC's atmosphere of abandoned military might and the persistence of violence long after its original purpose has been forgotten. The Death Claw. Overpopulation problem. The Divide is infested with death claws, including some of the highest level variants in the game. These creatures moved into the region after the destruction, finding the abandoned military installations and underground tunnels ideal for nesting. The Deathclaw population creates a constant threat throughout Lonesome Road, with the creatures ambushing players from rubble piles, emerging from underground, or charging across open terrain. Tunnel Deathclaws, blind variants that hunt by sound, add a stealth element to certain areas, requiring players to move quietly or face multiple powerful enemies at once. The Deathclaw presence transforms the Divide from a purely human tragedy into a post-human ecosystem where nature's most dangerous predators have claimed the ruins. Fighting through Deathclaw territory also serves as a difficulty gate. Players need strong equipment and tactics to survive, ensuring that Lonesome Road remains challenging even for high-level characters. The Deathclaws also tie into Ulysses' philosophy. These creatures don't care about symbols, nations, or history. They simply survive and hunt, representing a post-apocalyptic future where human concerns become irrelevant and only the strong remain. The overpopulation problem is intentional design. Obsidian wanted Lonesome Road to feel genuinely dangerous, a place where even experienced players would struggle, and where every encounter required careful planning and resource management. The Hopeville and Ashton Ruins. Hopeville and Ashton, the two main settlement ruins in the Divide, tell the story of what was lost when the missiles launched. Terminal entries, skeletons frozen in final moments, and scattered belongings paint a picture of communities that were thriving just before everything ended. Hopeville was the larger settlement, a logistics hub where NCR and Legion personnel coordinated supply deliveries despite their nation's conflict. Ashton was smaller, but no less important, housing civilian contractors and their families. The ruins show signs of normal pre-destruction life, schools, shops, homes, and community centers now buried under rubble and twisted metal. Exploring these ruins feels archaeological, like you're uncovering a lost civilization rather than just looting another destroyed town. The environmental design in Hopeville and Ashton is dense with storytelling. Every room tells a small story about who lived there and what they were doing when the end came. This attention to detail makes the Divide's destruction feel personal and tragic rather than abstract. The ruins also serve gameplay purposes, providing cover during combat encounters and hiding valuable loot for players willing to explore thoroughly. Hopeville and Ashton represent what the Courier destroyed unknowingly, not just territory or infrastructure, but communities full of people with lives, relationships, and futures that were erased in an instant. The High Road and Cave System. The High Road, a network of destroyed highways suspended above the divide, offers a different navigation path through the DLC. Players can choose to traverse the elevated roadways, fighting through marked men and dealing with unstable sections that could collapse, or they can take the cave systems and underground tunnels that run beneath the surface. This vertical level design is unusual for Fallout and creates strategic choices. The high road offers better sightlines for snipers but less cover, while the caves provide protection but tighter quarters that favor close-range combat. The high road sections also showcase Lonesome Road's most dramatic environmental design, with sections of highway hanging at impossible angles, held up by debris and structural luck rather than engineering. Walking across these precarious paths while wind and radiation storms rage around you creates a sense of constant danger and instability. The cave systems, meanwhile, are home to tunnel death claws and contain some of the DLC's best hidden loot, rewarding players who choose the more claustrophobic route. The parallel path system shows Obsidian thinking about player agency even in level design. Instead of forcing everyone through the same linear sequence, they created options that favor different playstyles and risk tolerances. Whether you prefer the tactical advantages of high ground or the safety of underground cover, Lonesome Road accommodates both approaches. The crane and environmental puzzles. Lonesome Road includes several environmental puzzles where players must use industrial equipment like cranes and forklifts to clear paths or reach previously inaccessible areas. These puzzles break up the combat-heavy pacing and add variety to exploration. Operating a crane to move debris and create a bridge across a chasm feels satisfying in a tactile way that pure combat doesn't match. The environmental puzzle design is relatively simple. Most involve activating terminals or pushing obvious levers, but it's effective at making the divide feel like a real industrial military space rather than just a combat arena. These moments also reinforce that the Courier is navigating a functional infrastructure that's been frozen in catastrophic failure. The cranes were moving supplies when everything stopped, and now you're using them to navigate ruins rather than build communities. Some puzzles are optional, hiding better loot or shortcut paths for observant players, while others are required to progress. The inclusion of these mechanical puzzles shows Obsidian varying gameplay loops to maintain interest across a longer DLC, combat encounters, dialogue sequences, exploration, and now environmental problem solving all mixed together to create a more dynamic experience than if Lonesome Road was purely about shooting marked men. Ulysses' camp and personal effects. Near the end of Lonesome Road, players discover Ulysses' camp, where he's been living while maintaining the divide and preparing for the Courier's arrival. The camp contains personal effects that humanize Ulysses and provide insight into his mindset, journals analyzing the Courier's past deliveries, maps marked with strategic locations, and collected symbols from the old world. These items reveal that Ulysses has been obsessed with the Courier for years, tracking their movements and building a philosophical framework around their role in the Divide's destruction. The camp also contains practical supplies, ammunition, weapons, and healing items, suggesting Ulysses has been living in the Divide's hellscape by choice, surviving through skill and preparation. His willingness to endure this environment just to orchestrate a confrontation shows both his dedication and his madness. The camp's location, positioned to overlook the divide's most devastated areas, suggests Ulysses meditates on destruction and consequence, using the ruins as a constant reminder of what was lost. For players who engage with environmental storytelling, Ulysses' camp adds depth to his character, showing that his philosophy isn't just abstract rhetoric. He's been living in the consequences of the Courier's actions, literally dwelling in tragedy while waiting for the chance to force accountability. The ending slides as Lonesome Road integration, completing Lonesome Road, affects New Vegas's ending slides in subtle but meaningful ways. If you nuke the NCR or Legion, the ending acknowledges the irradiated territories and their impact on those factions' strength and morale. The slides describe how the Long 15 or dry wells became impassable, forcing strategic shifts and weakening the affected faction's position at Hoover Dam. If you spare Ulysses, he appears in ending slides, either continuing his journey across the wasteland or settling somewhere to contemplate what he learned from the Courier. Eddie's fate also factors in. If you sacrifice the iBot, its absence is noted, while if it survived, the slides mention its continued service. These integrations show that Lonesome Road isn't just a side adventure. It has lasting consequences for the Mojave's future. The nuclear option in particular can dramatically reshape the balance of power, making certain endings easier or harder to achieve depending on which faction you weakened. This integration of DLC choices into the main ending reflects Obsidian's design philosophy: everything should matter, and players should see the consequences of their actions reflected in the world and story. Lonesome Road's ending slides close not just the DLC's story but also the Courier's entire journey, providing a thematic bookend to a character arc that began in a shallow grave outside Good Springs and ends with the power to reshape nations or walk away from the Mojave entirely. Matthew Perry's voice acting session, famous for playing Chandler on Friends, voiced Benny in Fallout New Vegas. What most players don't know is that Perry was such a huge fan of Fallout 3 that he specifically requested to be in New Vegas. The developers wrote Benny's character with Perry's smooth talking, slightly nervous energy in mind. Perry recorded all his lines in just a few sessions, and his performance became so iconic that "Ring-a-ding-ding" became one of the most quoted lines in the entire Fallout franchise. Wayne Newton, as Mr. New Vegas, Las Vegas legend Wayne Newton voiced the radio DJ Mr. New Vegas, but his involvement was kept surprisingly low-key during development. Newton recorded his lines in a single marathon session, delivering all the news updates, song introductions, and cheerful commentary that plays throughout the game. The developers specifically wanted an authentic Vegas voice, and Newton's smooth, crooning delivery made Mr. New Vegas feel like a real radio personality from the city's golden age. The mysterious stranger has a son. The mysterious stranger perk allows a shadowy figure to appear during VATS and help you finish off enemies. What's obscure is that New Vegas contains hints suggesting the mysterious stranger has a son. There are audio files and quest references that were partially implemented but never fully completed, pointing toward a young man following in his father's footsteps. This connection was never fully explained, making it one of the game's most intriguing unsolved mysteries. You can sell Arcade into slavery. Arcade Ganon, the followers of the Apocalypse Companion, can be sold into slavery to Caesar's Legion as Caesar's personal physician. This dark choice is hidden deep in his companion quest line and requires specific dialogue choices that most players never discover. If you go through with it, Arcade is fitted with an explosive collar and forced to serve the Legion, leading to one of the most morally disturbing companion fates in the entire game. The Owen and Baru Easter egg. Outside a burned house in Nipton, players with the Wild Wasteland trait can find two skeletons named Owen and Baru. This is a direct reference to Luke Skywalker's Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru from Star Wars Episode 4, who were killed by Imperial stormtroopers and left as charred remains outside their moisture farm on Tatooine. The parallel is deliberate, right down to the positioning and the burnt homestead, making it one of New Vegas's most carefully staged pop culture references. The Indiana Jones Fridge, just southeast of Good Springs, near the start of the game, players can find a refrigerator with its door missing. Inside is a skeleton wearing a suave gambler hat. This is a reference to Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where Indy survives a nuclear blast by hiding in a lead-lined fridge. The Easter egg pokes fun at one of the most ridiculed scenes in modern cinema while rewarding players with a unique hat. Ron Perlman's automatic return. Ron Perlman has been the narrator for every mainline Fallout game, and his return for New Vegas was considered so essential that the developers didn't even audition anyone else. Perlman's gravelly voice has become synonymous with the series' opening and closing narrations, and recording his lines was treated as a tradition rather than a casting decision. His iconic War Never Changes intro is one of gaming's most recognizable voice lines. The Cut Vicky and Vance Casino quest. The Vicky and Vance Casino in Prim was supposed to have its own quest where players track down Vance's stolen gun, taken by two thieves named Pauline and Sammy Weathers. Once you recovered the weapon, you were meant to return it to Prim Slim, who still has unused dialogue thanking you for it. The quest was cut late in development, but all the voice lines and quest markers remain buried in the game files. Vulpes Inculta's blonde hair, the Legion's spy master, was originally designed with blonde hair, as seen on his collector's edition playing card and in some ending slides. However, his in-game model uses dark hair instead. This inconsistency suggests a last-minute character design change that wasn't carried through to all the promotional materials, leaving his canon appearance a bit ambiguous. Caesar has cut dialogue Caesar was supposed to acknowledge if you wiped out NCR ranger stations on his behalf before meeting him. Unused voice lines show him praising your effectiveness and noting that your actions had already reached his ears. This would have made your first meeting with Caesar feel more personalized, as he'd recognize your work for the Legion before you even crossed the Colorado, the sealed sewers beneath New Vegas. Underneath the majority of the New Vegas map is a vast, fully modeled sewer system that was sealed off before release. The developers disabled access because playtesters discovered they could enter the sewers in Prim and skip straight to the strip, bypassing huge chunks of the game. A few sewer entrances remain accessible, but they're dead ends that contain nothing of value, ghosts of a larger underground network. You can serve your companions to cannibals. During the Beyond the Beef quest, it's possible to serve your human companions to the White Glove Society in place of Ted Gunderson. This incredibly dark option requires specific dialogue choices and a willingness to sacrifice a follower to maintain your cover or satisfy the cannibal elites. Most players never discover this path because the moral cost is so steep.